That night, Shi Feng had planned to cook an extra special bento for his dear sister Renxue. Trading a home-cooked meal for a single letter felt utterly absurd, like selling oneself for nothing, but Xiaoying was insistent. All right, he finally agreed, but on one condition. Xiaoying looked up, wary. What condition? You let me read the letter first. Her eyes flashed. No way, that letter is for the lady's eyes only. Shi Feng grinned. Surely you're at least a little curious? I'm curious, Xiaoying admitted, but I won't betray her trust. Her steadfast loyalty surprised him, so he dropped the idea. He could always hand the letter to Renxue himself tonight and find out then. Fine. When will you deliver it? In the evening, Xiaoying replied. The lady might be away during the day. Unless the bishop marks it urgent, wait until night to give it to her. Shi Feng nodded, excused himself, and returned to his room. There, he pulled out the dossier Renxue had given him and reviewed every detail of his new identity. After several hours of study, he fell into a light sleep. When he awoke later, he could still hear Xiaoying practicing diligently down the hall. Shi Feng shook his head with a wry smile. What a cultivation fanatic. Still can't get enough. He watched as Xiaoying pressed on relentlessly. Once fatigue hit, she'd rest only briefly before plunging back into her exercises. For someone only 17, her breakthrough into the soul sect realm was already extraordinary. Shi Feng suspected her talent might even rival Hu Liena's, though her sheer determination surely played a huge part. A thoughtful gleam appeared in his eyes. Xiaoying was by Chan Renxue's side. Making her stronger would serve them both. With that in mind, he slipped quietly from his bed and made his way to the kitchen. Before long, the savory scents of rice, vegetables, and braised meat began to fill the air as he assembled a warm bento box. Back in her room, Xiaoying stirred at the faint clatter of dishes. She pried open one drowsy eye and, spotting Shi Feng bustling about below her window, felt a surge of gratitude. She had yet to reveal the mysterious letter to him, and still he cared enough to cook for her. He truly is someone I can trust, she thought, warmth blooming in her chest. In that soft morning light, Shi Feng's figure seemed to grow taller, more dependable, exactly the kind of friend she needed. Shi Feng hummed softly as he slid another slice of pickled daikon onto the bento tray. He could still see Qian Renshui's delighted expression when she'd tasted his cooking, her eyes lighting up, a shy smile playing on her lips. Cooking for someone he cared about filled him with a warmth he'd never known before. Just as he reached for a handful of sesame seeds, light footsteps echoed behind him. Turning, he saw Xiaoying gliding into the kitchen. Shi Feng, let me help, she offered brightly. We're friends now, right? I should pitch in. Shi Feng forced a polite smile but shook his head. Actually, it's easier if you stay out of my way. He pointed at the pile of garlic by the door. Just peel those, please. Xiaoying blinked in surprise but didn't argue. She grabbed the garlic and padded out of the kitchen, mumbling under her breath. As she squatted against the wall in the hallway, she peeled each clove with deliberate slowness, occasionally peering back through the doorway at Shi Feng. He moved with precise, confident strokes, arranging ingredients and seasoning each layer with care. She couldn't help herself. What was it about Shi Feng's cooking that made even garlic seem like a royal decree to be obeyed? Had he trained somewhere secret, like the Pope's palace kitchens they whispered about? Xiaoying shook her head, smirking. Whatever his background, she couldn't deny she was curious to taste whatever masterpiece he was about to unveil. Shi Feng's culinary talent was extraordinary for someone so young. Xiaoying couldn't help but think, no wonder the Pope's palace is full of hidden masters. Perhaps the young lady befriended him on the strength of his skill alone. Are they peeled yet? Shi Feng called over his shoulder. Almost, Xiaoying answered, but she still held a few garlic cloves in her hand. Before she could finish, Shi Feng reached out and plucked one clove from her grasp. With a deft flick powered by his soul energy, he rolled the garlic between his fingers, and the skin slid off in a single, immaculate piece. That was fast, Xiaoying murmured, her eyes widening in genuine admiration. Shi Feng glanced at her, then tapped his soul tool. A folding table and a set of chairs shimmered into being beside him. Help me put these away. Right away, Xiaoying replied, smiling as she moved to tuck the utensils neatly back of the soul tool. Chapter 190, Grapes Are So Sour. Shi Feng carefully handed out the dishes he'd prepared. Xiaoying carried them to the table, her eyes bright and the corners of her mouth twitching in a shy, excited smile. She glanced around, but because some plates were still missing, she felt too embarrassed to dig in first. When Shi Feng finally set the last dish in front of her, he grinned and said, "Go ahead, don't wait for me." Xiaoying lifted the lid and peered inside. Shi Feng had packed multi-tiered lunchboxes that morning, each layer brimming with vegetables. On the very top, he drizzled tomato sauce into a perfect little heart. He stepped back, hands in his pockets, pleased as punch. "What are you staring at?" he teased. "I'm done here." With a burst of relief, Xiaoying tucked in and ate with gusto. When she'd finished, she cheerfully volunteered to wash the dishes. By the time she dried the last plate, dusk had settled over the room. Shi Feng gathered up the empty lunchboxes and followed her into the hallway. "Come on," he said. "Let's take these to Shuer." Xiaoying froze in the corridor. "You kept an extra set?" she asked, wide-eyed. Shi Feng only smiled, holding the boxes like a precious treasure. Shi Feng had just tucked the lunchbox away when he realized Xiaoying hadn't noticed it. Grinning, he said, "I'll let her taste my cooking." A proverb from his previous life flashed through his mind. To win a person's heart, first win their stomach. Why shouldn't it work on women, too? With that, he swung open the hidden hatch and bent to crawl inside. But Xiaoying grabbed his arm. "I'll go down first," she insisted, her voice trembling with the memory of last night. She refused to let Shi Feng peek up her skirt again. No matter how many layers she wore, she wouldn't risk that embarrassment twice. Standing about 1.7 meters tall, she still wore the same pale dress from yesterday, its slim waist and flowing hem flattering her figure. Below the skirt, her dainty embroidered slippers revealed just a glimpse of smooth white calf, an understated yet undeniably alluring sight, especially to someone like Shi Feng, who appreciated subtle beauty. Beyond her striking, sculpted features, however, she claimed no other special charms, and she intended to keep it that way. Shi Feng held out his hand in invitation. "You first." Xiaoying inclined her porcelain chin and eased her skirts aside as she stepped into the shaft. Shi Feng followed, casually sealing the entrance behind them. Below, the little shadow had already unleashed its soul ring, bathing the narrow passage in a soft yellow-purple glow. Cradling his lunchbox, Shi Feng began to descend on hands and knees. He could have dropped straight down, but he didn't want to lose the extra seconds. At the bottom, they emerged side by side. The awkwardness that had tinged their rapport last night had all but vanished. Shi Feng broke the comfortable silence. "Xiaoying, are you an only child?" She paused, her eyes drifting to the glowing walls. "My father died on a mission a few years ago. I was supposed to go to Wuhun City afterward, but Madame Li took me in and found me another assignment." "Have you ever studied at the Martial Soul Academy?" Shi Feng asked. Xiaoying shook her head. "No. After father, well, I never had the chance." Shi Feng nodded, weighing her words as they set off down the winding corridor. The soft hum of the soul ring above them was the only sound overhead, and for a moment they walked in companionable silence, each lost in their own thoughts. Xiaoying shook her head, looking bewildered. "No. Don't you have any other friends?" She hesitated, glancing down at her embroidered slippers. "No, aside from Miss, who's always been kind, I don't really know anyone else." Shi Feng felt a pang of sympathy. The child must be so starved for affection. He offered her a gentle smile. "It's me, Shi Feng. Brother Feng," she corrected herself, voice barely above a whisper. "Yes?" he prompted. She bit her lip, cheeks coloring. "Is the papaya treatment you meant ioned at lunch really effective?" Her question came so softly that, if he hadn't been watching her so closely, he might have missed it. Shi Feng crouched to meet her eyes. "If you take it consistently, it should work." At that moment, a wave of guilt washed over him. Why did he feel so responsible for this little girl's hopes? Shi Feng glanced at Xiaoying thoughtfully. "If you combine these exercises with a few extra techniques, you'll see better results," he said. Xiaoying, though 17, looked barely 12. Her small frame and neutral-sounding voice made her seem years younger. Shi Feng wasn't a gynecologist, so he could only speculate that a hormonal imbalance might be to blame. "What kind of techniques?" Her wide eyes sparkled in the dim underground chamber. He hesitated, choosing his words. "Well, You'll need to massage the area by hand for about 30 minutes each day. Pay attention to when your body starts to warm up. That's a good sign you're doing it right. He knew his advice was only half-baked, but it was all he'd ever heard. From the corner of his eye, he caught her cheeks flush and her gaze dropped to the ground. The conversation ended abruptly, leaving an awkward silence hanging between them. Shi Feng followed Xiaoying down the hallway toward Qian Renshui's chamber. As they reached the bottom of the stairs, Xiaoying paused, shot him a sharp glance, and warned, "Don't even think about taking advantage of the miss." Shi Feng fought a wry smile. Xiaoying fussed over Miss Qian like a mother hen guarding her chicks, as if he'd do anything improper. He really wanted to retort, "Funny you should worry. I already know the color of your underwear." But he held his tongue. If he'd said it, both girls would have pounced on him like hungry tigresses. He kept pace behind Xiaoying as she swung open the door to Renshui's boudoir. Inside, the steady rush of running water drifted out from the adjoining bathroom. Shi Feng's mind briefly conjured memories he'd never meant to keep. Ever since awakening, he'd only once, by accident, glimpsed another woman. That was Bibi Dong. He'd always refused to wield his divine gaze to stare at anyone else. To him, such behavior felt shameful, a corruption of the mind and spirit. He kept strict guard over his senses, allowing himself no exception unless it truly happened by accident. Xiaoying planted herself directly between Shi Feng and the bathroom door, arms crossed and gaze sharp. "Don't even think about sneaking a peek at Miss Renshui," she warned. Shi Feng spread his hands in mock innocence. "Little sister Xiaoying, I'm a perfectly honest gentleman." "A gentleman? My foot." Xiaoying scoffed, still smarting from the deliberate slap he'd delivered the night before. "Just stay right there and don't move an inch." Without waiting for a response, she strode to the door, rapped twice, and called, "Miss Renshui? It's Xiaoying." When Qian Renshui didn't answer, Xiaoying pushed the door open and slipped inside. The moment it clicked shut, her head reappeared, giving Shi Feng a warning glare he couldn't ignore. Loose strands of her ear-length hair framed a flushed, determined face that made it clear she meant business. Shi Feng hesitated, caught off guard by the fierce protectiveness of a young maid. He felt a flicker of embarrassment. Was he really blushing in front of a girl? But he refused to look foolish. Quietly, he crossed the room and sank onto the chair beside him, leaning forward so his ear pressed against the closed door. Through the thin wood, a soft, muffled voice began to reach him, just barely audible, yet crystal clear in his mind. Shi Feng carried the tray of steaming tea into the room and offered politely, "Allow me, miss." Qian Renshui didn't answer at first, but after a moment she called, "Xiaoying, come help us." "Right away, my lady." Xiaoying hurried forward, her voice bright with excitement. Shi Feng forced a polite smile, though the grapes he'd sampled earlier still tasted bitter in his mouth. He glanced at Qian Renshui's slender silhouette. "You look absolutely stunning in that dress, miss." Qian Renshui shot Xiaoying a teasing look. "And you're looking lovely as well." A small wave of relief washed over Shi Feng. Thankfully, the two of them clearly got along. If they'd been rivals, he'd be in for a scolding. After another half hour, the women emerged from the dressing room, their hair still damp and their cheeks flushed. Xiaoying's rosy glow made her look like a ripe apple, the pale blue gown she'd chosen hugging her curves in all the right places. Qian Renshui had slipped into one of the skirts Shi Feng had sent over. Her blonde locks framed her face as she rose gracefully and sank into the chair opposite him. A delicate floral scent drifted through the air. Xiaoying pulled up a low stool and settled in front of them, her eyes shining with anticipation. Shi Feng carefully set the lunchbox on the table in front of Qian Renshui. "What's this?" she asked warily, eyeing the container. "It's a special dish I made just for you," Shi Feng replied, his smile hopeful. "It's still warm. Please, give it a try." Chapter 191, Killing Intent. Shi Feng watched eagerly as Qian Renshui peered at the lunchbox in his hands, curious to see her reaction. "You can cook?" she asked, genuinely astonished. Here was a notorious warrior, someone who'd slain countless foes, now daring to play chef. Shi Feng grinned. "Go on, try it. I promise you'll be surprised." "Miss, it really is delicious. I've already had mine," Xiaoying chimed in from her little stool, her eyes shining as she stared at the lunchbox. Qian Renshui's curiosity deepened. All right, let me taste it for myself. With a graceful lift of her slender fingers, she opened the lid. At first glance, the dishes looked ordinary, but then Qian Renxue froze. On the top plate, a perfect heart had been drawn in sauce. The meaning was unmistakable, an expression of affection. Her heartbeat fluttered. She stole a quick glance at Xiaoying, then composed herself. Gently, she raised a piece to her lips. As she chewed, her elegant posture never wavered, and a sudden, indescribable light lit up her almond-shaped eyes. Qian Renxue sat in the palace, where over the past few years she'd sampled countless delicacies. Imperial chefs had sharpened her palate to a razor's edge, and today she'd planned only a polite tasting, just enough to offer Shi Feng a courteous compliment. Yet the moment she tried the first bite, she knew this dish was in a class by itself. It wasn't merely fine palace fare. It felt like top-tier cuisine from another world. "Your Highness, how is it?" Maid Xiaoying asked, eyes shining with anticipation. Qian Renxue closed her eyes for a heartbeat, letting the flavors linger before she answered. "Absolutely exquisite," she said, smiling, not a bit inferior to anything served in the palace. Xiaoying practically glowed. "Then please have more." From the side of the table, Shi Feng's voice chimed in quietly, almost drowned out by Xiaoying's excitement. "She's already had her fill." As Xiaoying leapt to her feet, Shi Feng noticed something amiss on the serving plate. The delicate red, heart-shaped garnish lay crushed beneath Qian Renxue's chopsticks. He frowned and muttered, "The little heart's ruined now." Xiaoying shot him a glare, hands planted firmly on her hips. Despite the scolding, a triumphant smile played on her lips. After all, the princess had loved every bite. There was an extra pair of chopsticks tucked into the lunchbox. Shi Feng had meant it for a romantic dinner with Qian Renxue, but his penny-pinching streak had backfired. In the end, he ceded his seat to Xiaoying and settled down across the table. "This is actually not bad. So good. Really delicious." Qian Renshui's delighted exclamations banished the last of Shi Feng's annoyance, and a small smile tugged at his lips. He still couldn't read her. Earlier, when she'd spotted the little heart he'd drawn on the box, her face hadn't flickered at all. As expected of a true foodie, she polished off plate after plate until, belch, she let out a satisfied burp. Even though she'd eaten not long ago, she now felt comfortably full. Xiaoying moved in, cleared the dishes, and handed them to Shi Feng, who slipped them neatly into his soul tool. When he looked up, Qian Renxue was watching him with bright, expectant eyes. "Shi Feng," she said, an amused lilt in her voice. "I never realized you could cook so well. You'd better be prepared to whip up more meals like this for me from now on." She rolled her eyes playfully, but the hopeful sparkle in her gaze gave away how much she meant it. Shi Feng's cooking was unlike anything Qian Renxue had tasted before. The palace chefs were undoubtedly skilled, but after years of grand banquets, their dishes all began to blur together. Each new signature recipe felt more like a stale replay of the last. Yet with the very first bite of Shi Feng's carefully composed entree, Renxue felt as though she'd been lifted to a higher plane of flavor. "Sister," Shi Feng said, eyes shining with earnest warmth, "if you wish, I would be honored to prepare meals like this for you every single day of my life." Renshui's cheeks warmed. She quickly turned her gaze to the side, heart pounding. How could he speak so boldly? And with Xiaoying sitting just a few steps away, Shi Feng caught sight of Xiaoying's expression, a tight knot of fury so evident that her entire face seemed ready to snap. He suppressed a chuckle, convinced that no mere glare could deter him. Then he cleared his throat twice, straightened his posture, and addressed Xiaoying with a solemn air. "Sister Xiaoying, Bishop Salas asked you to deliver a letter to Xuer today, didn't he?" At the mention of Xuer, Renxue froze, then whipped her head back toward him, eyes blazing. This younger brother was becoming bolder by the day. Shi Feng met her glare for a heartbeat, then wisely dropped his gaze, a small, knowing smile playing on his lips. Shi Feng remained perfectly still. No blush rose to his cheeks, his heart didn't skip a beat, and he didn't even turn to look at Qian Renxue. Frustrated, Qian Renxue decided to scold him right there in front of Xiaoying. "Xiaoying," she said, fixing the younger girl with a stern gaze, "give me the secret letter." Xiaoying shot a furious look at Shi Feng, then reluctantly handed the sealed envelope over to Qian Renxue. With a serious expression, Qian Rei slit the seal and unfolded the letter. As she read, surprise flickered across her face. She kept glancing back at Shi Feng, her brow knitting tighter with each line. From where he stood, Shi Feng could almost make out the words on the paper. It announced that he and Hu Liena had been designated the Holy Son and Holy Daughter. He knew the proclamation had been made days ago, but seeing it here, in Xiaoying's hand, still took him aback. Qian Renshui finally lowered the letter and looked at him. "Congratulations, Shi Feng." "Miss, what does it say?" Xiaoying pressed, her curiosity winning out. Qian Renshui handed the letter to her. "Read it yourself." Xiaoying skimmed the contents. Her eyes widened, and her mouth fell open in shock. Xiaoying didn't even notice when the letter slipped from her hand and fluttered to the floor. She lifted her head to look at Shi Feng, her shock slowly melting into stunned blankness. This carefree, handsome youth, who cooked like a gourmet and joked around like a street rascal, was the Holy Son? It didn't fit her expectations at all. In her mind, the Holy Son should have been majestic, untouchable, and awe-inspiring. "Sister Xiaoying," Shi Feng teased, his lips curving into a teasing grin, "have I suddenly won your admiration?" Xiaoying said nothing. She turned away, refusing to meet his gaze. She'd always assumed Shi Feng's status was no different from hers, never that he harbored the most exalted title in the realm. "When did you become her brother?" Qian Renshui asked, stepping forward with a curious tilt of her head. Shi Feng winked at her. "I'm the elder." For a moment, Qian Renshui looked ready to call him out, but she decided against it. She stooped, retrieved the fallen letter, and stood. With a wave of her hand, she addressed the two of them. "If there's nothing else, you may go. I have training to catch up on, and I won't tolerate any slacking off from either of you." Xiaoying finally found her voice. "Understood," she said, still reeling from the revelation. Shi Feng approached his sister and bowed slightly. "Sister, I have news." Qian Renshi looked up as she settled back onto the cushion. A sleek black raven fluttered in through the open lattice and settled on the windowsill, its beady eyes reflecting the dying light. Shi Feng allowed himself a faint smile. "Do you remember what happened a year ago?" Instantly, Qian Renshui's cheeks flushed, and she dove back into that memory. The moment she had caught Shi Feng in the courtyard, her eyes blazing with indignation as she scolded him for his recklessness. It was a painful memory, but all distractions aside, Shi Feng drew a steadying breath and plunged into his report. "I've been tailing Prince Shui Xing," he began, "and I discovered that he's been hunting for Shui Beng." Shi Feng's tone darkened. When he found her, he humiliated an innocent girl, someone no older than Xiaoying. She was nothing more than an ordinary girl, and he treated her like cattle, far worse than any animal. Afterward, he threatened her with ruin. He sent his men to tear her home apart as a warning never to speak of it. At this point, she probably sees no reason to go on living. He paused, watching his sister and Xiaoying. Both young women had clenched their fists so tightly, their knuckles had turned white. Their once gentle features had hardened into something fierce, eyes burning with a deadly promise of vengeance. The raven cawed sharply, as if echoing their unspoken vow. Justice would be served. Chapter 192, Conspiracy. According to Shui Beng, this isn't the first time he's done this, Shi Feng said, his tone grim. He's even instructed his servants to scour the city for more girls, specifically, girls of a certain disposition. With a sudden crack, Qian Renshui's palm slammed into the table. The teacup rattled against its saucer and shot a few inches into the air before clattering back down. "A monster," she seethed. "I thought he was simply obsessed with brothels, but I never imagined he'd sink this low." Her eyes burned with rage. A creature like him deserves nothing less than death. Across from her, Xiaoying's face had gone ice cold. "Sister, calm yourself. I haven't even told you the worst of it." Shi Feng glanced between the two women before carrying on. "Prince Shui Xing confronted Shui Beng today. He discovered that Shui Beng forced his own nephew, Shui Bing, to masquerade as a boy, an outrage Shui Xing could not tolerate. He scolded Beng harshly and has ordered an investigation." At this, Qian Renshui's murderous glare faltered, replaced by stark alarm. Her heart pounded. So the Shui family had already grown suspicious and quietly begun their inquiries. If Shi Feng hadn't warned her, she might have remained in the dark, only to be exposed when hard evidence surfaced. And then all her years of scheming within the Five Soul Temple would unravel overnight. A cold sweat crept down her spine. This was far more dangerous than she had imagined. The end of chapter 192. Page 266. Qian Renshui's anxiety was far from unfounded. Had Shi Feng not intervened, events would have proceeded exactly as she feared. Prince Xuexing, alarmed by Xueye's sudden illness, had summoned Douluo to the palace to investigate, and it was there that Douluo uncovered the truth behind Xueye's poisoning. He then confided everything to Tang San, who promptly foiled Qian Renshui's bid for the throne. Now, armed with Shi Feng's warning, Qian Renshui would no doubt scheme anew to eliminate both Xuexing and Xuebeng, and once the prince had been dealt with, Douluo would naturally make his way to Wuhan City. No, Qian Renshui whispered, more to herself than to anyone else. She rose from her seat and began to pace the length of the chamber, her mind racing through possibilities. Poison? An assassination? Or perhaps a more insidious stratagem? Her brow furrowed as one plan after another tumbled through her thoughts. Just then, Shi Feng cleared his throat. "Sister, I have a suggestion." Qian Renshui stopped and turned to him. "I'm listening." Shi Feng met her gaze steadily. Douluo mentioned that he still owes Prince Xuexing a debt of gratitude, and that's why he's reluctant to go to Wuhan City. If Xuexing suddenly died, Shi Feng reasoned, he'd have no one left to repay his favor to, and with his temperament, he'd almost certainly track down and punish the killer himself. And if we ever tried to move against Xuexing directly, Douluo would step in to defend him. Qian Renshui's eyes brightened. So to neutralize Xuexing's uncle and nephew, our first target has to be Douluo. Exactly. Shi Feng snapped his fingers. We've been so focused on dealing with the uncle and nephew that we overlooked the real linchpin, Douluo. Without him at Xuexing's side, any operation we launch will carry far less risk. Xiaoying frowned. But how do we pry Douluo away from Xuexing? Qian Renshui smiled. We go straight to the root of the problem. Douluo remains loyal to Xuexing because of an outstanding favor. If we can force him to return that favor legitimately, he'll have no reason to stick around. Shi Feng nodded. Our intelligence on Douluo tells us he's fiercely independent and resists being bound by others. We can't coerce him in the usual way. Instead, we need to engineer a situation in which he must use his unique skills to save someone close to him, someone whose safety depends on him fulfilling that favor. Once he's done, the debt is settled, and he's free to leave. Xiaoying's eyes gleamed with understanding. A perfect plan. It removes Douluo from the equation without directly confronting him. Qian Renshui tapped her chin thoughtfully. Now, we just need to identify the right target, someone whose peril will compel Douluo to act, and whose rescue won't interfere with our larger scheme against Xuexing's family. Shi Feng exchanged a look with his allies. Then let's begin. Time is of the essence. If he weren't so kind, he would have abandoned Xuexing long ago, Xiaoying murmured. Then how do we make him owe her a favor? She pressed. Qian Renshui pinched Xuebai's chin, dark eyes gleaming with calculation. We'll need Xuexing to beg him first, she said. Our job is to engineer a crisis for her. Once she's desperate, she'll have no choice but to plead for help. A spark of inspiration lit up Xiaoying's face. But what if Douluo steps in to rescue Xuexing on his own? Qian Renshui smiled thinly. That's why our plan must be flawless. We need Douluo to resolve Xuexing's predicament without ever suspecting that we're pulling the strings. If he realizes we manipulated him just to extract a favor, I'll be regretting my choice to join the Wuhun sect. Xiaoying nodded gravely. Douluo's talent is unmatched. In a city siege, his power alone can rival several title Douluos. We cannot afford to lose his allegiance. A frown creased Qian Renshui's perfect features as worry flickered in her eyes. Seeing her friend so troubled, Xiaoying felt a pang of frustration. If only she could come up with a more devious strategy. Xiaoying glared at Shi Feng and pouted. Master Shengzi said we have to sort out Douluo's situation first. You must have a plan, right? Shi Feng pinched his chin, blinking as he came back from his daydream. I do. What is it? Qian Renshui asked casually, her expectations low. She'd always prided herself on being wiser than Shi Feng. His cultivation talent was impressive, but in her mind, his intelligence didn't quite measure up to hers. Shi Feng shot a quick look at Xiaoying, then rose to his feet. He walked deliberately to stand before Qian Renshui. Now half a head taller than her, his presence felt unexpectedly imposing. With a bright smile bordering on mischief, he leaned in and pressed a quick kiss against Qian Renshui's flawless cheek. "What the?" Xiaoying snapped to her feet, indignation blazing in her eyes. "You little, what are you doing?" Shi Feng came to a stop, then turned back with a teasing smile. "I can't share this plan in front of everyone, so I'll whisper it to Shui." Qian Renshui let out a relieved breath, having worried Shi Feng might have had some embarrassing intention toward her. "Shui, come sit here," she instructed. Shui sulked down on the bench, lips pursed, and shot Shi Feng a sour look. Qian Renshui, cheeks tinged with color, turned her face aside, offering only a glimpse of her graceful profile. Leaning in close, Shi Feng began to describe his strategy in hushed tones. Details meant only for Qian Renshui's ears, not Shui's. His warm breath brushed her earlobe, and a soft shiver ran through her. An unexpected flutter of excitement swelled in her chest, and the heat in her cheeks deepened. From the corner of her eye, she saw Shui's jealous frown deepen as she watched. At first, Qian Renshui had only half listened, certain the plan would be trivial. But as Shi Feng laid out each clever move, her eyes widened, bright with interest. By the time he finished, she was so impressed she nearly clapped her hands in delight. After Shi Feng finished speaking, he stepped away from Qian Renshui and offered her a confident smile. Qian Renshui quietly replayed his plan in her mind, double-checking every detail until she was certain it was flawless. Only then did she lift her eyes to him. "Shi Feng," she said softly, "I never realized you were so powerful." Qian Renshui's lips curved into an approving smile. "If Shi Feng's plan works, Douluo will owe us a favor, and he'll never even suspect we've set him up." She paused to weigh their options. "For now, let's put off joining the guard. We'll stay here with Xiaoying." A frigid light ignited in her eyes. Shui Xing and Shui Beng must be eliminated. She tapped her finger against her chin, and Shui Xing's birthday is in 3 days. Striking then will have maximum impact. Shi Feng's heart lifted. He felt the first stirrings of hope. "Very well, I'll start making preparations tomorrow." Qian Renshui sighed and massaged her temple. "It's late. You two should head back and continue your training. Check in with me every day, and bring along something tasty to eat." "Understood," they answered in unison. They stepped into the darkened corridor, lit only by a faint yellow-purple glow. Xiaoying marched ahead, her small frame stiff with pouty indignation. Every time Shi Feng tried to catch up, she quickened her pace. "Sister Xiaoying, please wait for your brother," Shi Feng called after her, exasperated, but the echo of hurried footsteps was already fading into the shadows. Chapter 193. Goodbye, Duguyan. Xiaoying stopped in her tracks and fixed Shi Feng with a steely gaze. "Do you like Miss Lily?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Shi Feng blinked, surprised at how perceptive the little girl was. I didn't expect you to notice so quickly," he admitted, rubbing the back of his neck. He'd suspected something was off about Xiaoying's unusually sharp intuition, and now it was clear. There was no point in hiding his feelings. He took a steadying breath. "Yes, I like her." At his confession, Xiaoying's eyes went red. Without another word, she spun away and fled down the corridor, tiny sobs trailing after her. Shi Feng watched her go, a sigh escaping his lips. He knew he'd have to spend some time convincing her that Lily wasn't the perfect, flawless person Xiaoying imagined. Lily wasn't so fragrant after all. That evening, Shi Feng returned to Xiaoying's quarters. He gently pushed open her door and found her curled up under the covers, trembling softly. Her muffled sniffles filled the small room. "All right," he murmured to himself, taking a seat on the edge of her bed. "Time to put my comforting skills to use." He began to sing, the same gentle lullabies his mother had soothed him with as a child. One song followed another, each softer and sweeter than the last. By the time he finished, his throat was raw and his voice hoarse, but the tremors under the blanket had ceased. Carefully, he folded back the quilt. Xiaoying lay still for a moment, then her eyes fluttered open, blinking up at him with a mixture of surprise and gratitude. Shi Feng offered a warm smile. "See, everything's all right now." He stood, brushing a stray lock of hair from her forehead. "Good night, Xiaoying." Outside the door, he paused and drew a deep breath. Tomorrow, he would have to set things right between Xiaoying and Lily, say goodbye to the idealized image in her mind. But for now, at least, peace had returned to the hall. Shi Feng settled onto the edge of the bed and studied Xiaoying's upturned face. Do you know what you need to do from here on out? Xiaoying hugged her knees, silent for a moment as she absorbed his words. Though her cheeks were stained with dried tears, her eyes had cleared. At last she nodded. Thank you, Mr. Shengzi. I understand. A warm relief spread through Shi Feng. He offered her a small smile. You don't have to call me Lord Shengzi all the time. If you'd rather, just call me Brother Chen. Okay, Brother Chen, she replied, her tone earnest. Good. Now, focus on your training and stop letting your thoughts wander. Shi Feng ruffled her smooth bobbed black hair. Despite her flaws, her impulsiveness and tendency to dwell on things, she was the kind of person who welcomed honest criticism. His straightforward guidance had already helped her recognize her mistakes. He knew Xiaoying still carried a feet spot for Qian Renshui, and he'd been careful not to shame her. By gently steering her away from that dangerous infatuation, he'd managed to save her from making a decision she might have regretted. Now, with her resolve steadied, she was ready to move forward. Xiaoying's eyes sparkled with curiosity. She'd already broken through to the soul sect's inner ranks. Yet in every sparring match so far, Shi Feng had overwhelmed her without even calling upon his martial soul. Brother Feng, she asked, what cultivation level are you? He paused in mid-stride and glanced back. 44th level. A flicker of surprise crossed her face. I'm 47 years old and only just reached the 20th level, she admitted with a wry smile. You're twice my level at half my age? Shi Feng shook his head. Cultivation alone doesn't tell the whole story. It's combat experience that makes the difference. If you have time, I'll teach you some techniques. I promise your strength will increase several-fold. Xiaoying's eyes lit up. Thank you, Brother Feng. He nodded and turned to leave. I'd better get back to my own practice. Watching him go, Xiaoying felt genuine admiration welling up inside her. This son-in-law of hers was incredible. Handsome, a masterful cook, versed in countless rare skills, and filled with sound wisdom. Their brief conversation had opened her eyes to her own shortcomings. Determined, she resolved to purge all unrighteous thoughts from her mind and avoid any future missteps. Shi Feng stepped out the door and exhaled a long, relieved breath. Back in his quarters, he took a quick shower, then made his way to the roof. Once there, he sat cross-legged and let his gaze drift across the evening skyline. Before long, a familiar black shape fluttered into view. It was the little black sparrow, carrying a frantic bird in its talons. The captive struggled desperately, but to no avail. Shi Feng leaned forward for a closer look. Sleek, all-black feathers, a forked tail. It was a sharp-tailed swift. Excellent, he murmured. Compared to the sparrow, this swift speed would make her an even more capable scout. He extended his consciousness, weaving delicate spirit threads around the swift to bind her into a puppet under his command. In moments, both birds, sparrow and swift, launched into the air, vanishing between buildings on their missions. One would shadow Shui Xing, the other, Shui Beng. Shi Feng merely needed to allocate a sliver of his mental power to keep them alert, and with his reserves, it was nothing. He fell silent, drawing in a steady breath as he prepared to enter his cultivation state. The night was calm, and at last he could focus entirely on refining his strength. Shi Feng had just settled into his meditation when a faint, stifled sound drifted up from the room below. It was so soft, so tentative, like someone fighting a rush of embarrassment. Shi Feng frowned. The voice was unmistakably feminine, and it carried an odd mix of shyness and resolve. Had Xiaoying really? He shook his head, determined not to let curiosity break his focus. The air around him hummed with the subtle charge of moonlight essence, energy invisible to the naked eye, but perfect for refining one's cultivation. Drawing a steady breath, he let the silvery glow seep into his dantian, concentrating on transforming it into raw strength. Hours later, as the first pale shafts of dawn filtered through the courtyard gate, Shi Feng opened his eyes. He slipped silently from his chamber and leapt down to the yard, only to pause mid-descent. Before him, Xiaoying was humming softly as she draped fresh laundry over the line, and today, oddly enough, there were 2 pairs of panties fluttering in the breeze. Xiaoying turned at the sound of his footsteps and caught his gaze. Her cheeks flamed an almost comical crimson, and she dropped the shirt she was holding as if it had suddenly stung her fingers. For a trembling moment, her eyes flicked downward to the underwear swaying on the line, then back to Shi Feng's unreadable expression. Shi Feng's lips quirked. He remembered how, the night before, he had shown her a simple breathing technique to help circulate her qi more smoothly, and to guard against the embarrassment of cultivating private energy in an open space. Evidently, Xiaoying had practiced it, rather enthusiastically. Clearing his throat, he called up to her. "I'll take care of the rest of the laundry. Why don't you go get some breakfast?" Her blush deepened, but relief flickered in her eyes. With a hurried nod, she gathered up the garments and retreated inside. Shi Feng watched her go, shook his head with an affectionate smile, and stepped forward to rescue his handkerchief from its precarious perch. Sometimes, he thought wryly, cultivating the body truly was a messy business. Xiaoying woke before dawn, still mulling over the strange tingling she'd felt last night. Although she couldn't yet see any tangible effects from the new technique she'd tried, her body had definitely registered something unusual. By the time she peeked out of her small quarters, Shi Feng was already up, stretching until his spine cracked softly. "Good morning, Xiaoying," he greeted with a grin. "Morning, Brother Feng," she replied, rubbing the sleep from her eyes. Shi Feng yawned and ran a hand through his hair. "I'm heading out for a few hours. I won't be back until noon." Xiaoying's face brightened at once. "Brother Feng, do you need any laundry done? I can take care of it for you." He raised an eyebrow in surprise. She'd never offered such a favor before. Still, it was hard to refuse. Shi Feng emptied the slim sack at his feet and spread out every article of clothing he'd worn in the past 10 days since leaving Wuhandian. Thanks to the vacuum-sealed environment inside his soul tool, the garments looked clean and smelled fresh. "That's quite a lot," Xiaoying murmured, her cheeks tinged with green. She forced a confident smile. "I used to wash my father's clothes back home. From now on, yours are my responsibility." Shi Feng simply nodded, touched by her earnestness. After all, he had promised to pass on his combat experience to her, and if she wanted to show her gratitude in her own way, who was he to stand in her path? Shi Feng's younger sister waved from the courtyard gate, a teasing smile on her lips. "All right, good boy," she called out. "I'll be back at noon to cook for you." Shi Feng grinned. Having a sister who not only did his laundry but also promised him a home-cooked meal was wonderful indeed. With a light heart, he turned and strode toward the bustling streets of the inner city. Not far away, within the sturdy walls of the Douluo family estate, Duguyan tightened the sash of her traveling cloak. "Gran, DPA, I'm heading out for a bit," she announced as she stepped into the main hall. Came a muffled reply from the back room. Douluo remained seated at his polished wooden desk, eyes closed in deep concentration. Ever since the venom of the jade phosphorus snake had finally fused with the corpse venom circulating in his veins, ironically gifted by Shi Feng, his lifelong poisoning had been completely cured. The agonizing, relentless pain that had plagued him day after day for decades had vanished. No longer did he need to visit the Binghuo freezing furnace each morning to suppress the toxins. Freed from that daily burden, he had reclaimed vast stretches of time for his cultivation. What delighted him most was discovering that his progress had accelerated dramatically. Over the years, the spreading poison had steadily choked his advancement, making each breakthrough more elusive than the last. He had long feared he would never transcend his current barrier, yet now, with his body purified, the path before him felt suddenly wide open. From behind the heavy wooden door, Douluo inhaled deeply, summoning fresh waves of soul energy. A smile of quiet triumph curved his lips. At long last, the poison was history, and a new chapter of his cultivation journey had begun. "Honestly, I never imagined that surviving the catastrophe would bring its own rewards. All thanks to that kid, the Pope's disciple. He truly is worthy of my granddaughter. We'll see what opportunities the future holds." Shi Feng slipped into the inner city and checked into a small hotel, booking an hourly room. He settled onto the bed and waited in silence. Before long, a gentle knock sounded at the door, followed by Duguyan's soft voice. "Master? Come in." The door opened quietly, and Duguyan stepped inside. Only when she saw Shi Feng did she visibly relax. Earlier, she'd been unsettled by his summons, unsure whether it had been real. Now, however, she was certain. She closed the door behind her and approached him with a deferential nod. Shi Feng looked up in surprise. Duguyan had reverted to her more unusual form. Her hair was cut short and dyed a deep violet, tousled around her face, and her eyes gleamed emerald green. Her features, while not classically perfect, held a curious, exotic charm, and her figure was noticeably softer, more rounded than that of most girls, as if she'd recently changed. "Didn't I already finish detoxifying you?" Shi Feng asked, rising to his feet and examining her carefully. "So why are your hair and eyes like this?" Chapter 194, Finalizing the Plan. Duguyan stepped into the chamber and bowed. "Master, after you removed the poison, my hair and eye color returned to normal almost immediately, and I haven't felt any ill effects. My grandfather examined me as well. He found nothing wrong." Shi Feng inclined his head. "That may be due to the strength of your martial spirit." Duguyan hesitated. "Is there something you wish me to do?" He motioned to the chair beside him. "Please, sit down. We have some matters to discuss." Duguyan sat on the edge of the seat, straightening her back like a dutiful student. She offered him a polite smile. "How have you been lately, master?" "I'm well, thank you," she replied softly, then flushed at being asked. Shi Feng drummed his fingertips on the tabletop, studying her. "The reason I summoned you today is that I have a task for you." Her eyes brightened. "Master, just tell me what you need, and I, Yan Yan, will see it done." Shi Feng raised an eyebrow. "Aren't you curious about the details?" Duguyan bowed her head, voice barely above a whisper. "I only ask one thing. Please promise you won't harm my grandfather or my fiancé. If you give me that assurance, I'll follow any orders." Shi Feng exhaled, the wheels of his plan already turning in his mind. Shi Feng could bend Duguyan's will to his purpose, but he could never erase the emotions she'd held since childhood, especially such deep, abiding loyalty. The same was true of Jing Wuming and Zhao Yuyo. Although they answered his commands, their hearts still lay with their families. If he ever ordered them to strike down their own kin, hesitation would surely follow. Softly, he said, "I would never ask you to harm my family." He then recounted what he'd witnessed Shui Beng do the day before. As Shi Feng finished, Duguyan's hands curled into tight fists, her eyes blazing with hatred as a murderous aura burst around her. Startled by the intensity of her reaction, Shi Feng gently patted her shoulder. "Easy," he murmured. "Tell me what's happening." Duguyan drew in a quavering breath and slowly let it out. "Master, the girl you mentioned, I know her well. We grew up side by side. She lived next door, though she never showed any gift for cultivation. Yesterday she came looking for me, sobbing so violently that her tears soaked her clothes. There were even bloodstains on her skirt. I had a dreadful premonition back then, but no matter how much I pressed her, she wouldn't say what was wrong. That very night, she took her own life." Tears welled in Duguyan's eyes, and her face twisted with hatred. "I never imagined it was that monster, Shui Beng," she whispered, voice hoarse. "I've heard whispers. Several young women from well-to-do families in the inner city have met with accidents lately. Now it all makes sense. Shui Beng is behind them." Shi Feng's chest tightened. He hadn't known that the girl Shui Beng assaulted yesterday was Duguyan's closest friend. Duguyan's hands trembled as she continued. "He's been eyeing me for months. If it weren't for grandfather's influence and your antidote, I'd be his next victim." Her emotions surged beyond control. Without warning, she strode forward and knelt before him, bowing her head so low her forehead nearly touched the floor. "Master," she begged, voice cracking, "I want him dead. Please help me." Shui Beng was a prince of a foreign land. To kill him would invite a diplomatic crisis, and with grandfather allied to Prince Xuexing, I could not act in her stead. All Duguyan could do was place her faith in me. I met her tearful gaze, knowing the choice before us would shape both our fates. Duguyan sank to her knees, tears still glistening on her cheeks. She'd pinned all her hopes on Shi Feng. After all, as a master of the Wu Soul Hall, he was famed for finding solutions where others saw only dead ends. Shi Feng knelt beside her and gently helped her to her feet. He'd summoned her this morning to set in motion the plan he'd outlined to Qian Renshui just last night. But he hadn't expected their target to plunge right into their trap so swiftly. "Don't worry," Shi Feng said, his dark eyes steady and determined. "I won't let those vermin walk away unpunished." He offered her a reassuring smile. though she could tell he was already calculating the next move. Duguyan's face clouded. But my grandfather still owes Prince Shui Xing a favor. If we make a move against Shui Beng now, he could very well step in to shield him. Shi Feng allowed himself a brief nod. Precisely why we can't go charging in headlong. We need leverage, something that'll force Shui Beng into the open and leave my grandfather no choice but to stand aside. A flicker of hope ignited in Duguyan's eyes, quickly smothered by her grief. She remembered her dearest friend only yesterday, pale, broken, trembling with terror, only to end her life in agony, choosing the noose over further humiliation. The image flared in her mind, and a cold, white-hot rage settled over her. "What kind of leverage?" she asked, voice low but fierce. Shi Feng crouched to her level. "We expose Shui Beng's secrets, turn his allies and Prince Shui Xing himself against him. Once his network unravels, he'll be vulnerable. That's when we strike." Duguyan squared her shoulders. "Then let's begin tonight." "Good," Shi Feng replied, rising and offering her his hand. "Meet me at the Jade Moon Pavilion after dusk. Bring nothing but your resolve." As she clasped his hand, Duguyan felt her grief transform into purpose. The path ahead would be dangerous, but with Shi Feng's guidance, she would see justice done for her fallen friend. Shi Feng guided Duguyan back onto the bench and knelt beside her. "Don't worry, I already have a plan for dealing with him. But first, I need to pressure your grandfather into calling in his favor with Prince Shui Xing. Then the prince won't have any reason to lend his support." Duguyan's eyes flared with determination. "Whatever you need me to do, master, just tell me. All I care about is taking down that dog." Shi Feng laid out the details in a low voice. "When the time comes, you're going to have to lie to your grandfather about where your loyalties lie. Can you do that?" She hesitated only a heartbeat before nodding fiercely. "Of course. My grandfather's been chained to that favor for years. Even though he's a titled Douluo, he's been avoiding repaying it. It's high time he did." Duguyan glanced at him. "Master, in 2 days it's Prince Shui Xing's grandfather's birthday banquet. If we strike then—" "No." Shi Feng held up a hand to stop her. "I considered using that celebration yesterday, but it would harm your reputation far too much. We'll proceed on another front, one that won't leave you compromised." After all, Duguyan is Shi Feng's loyal subordinate and will undoubtedly prove invaluable in the days ahead. Shi Feng's gaze was steady as he spoke. "Your reputation matters far more than the life of that beast. Think carefully. Is there any way in?" Duguyan hesitated, then his jade-green eyes brightened. "Actually, there is. Listen to this." He leaned closer. "Every week, Elder Shui Xing invites my grandfather to his estate for a game of chess, ostensibly to get closer to him. What Shui Xing doesn't know is that Grandpa's been politely refusing lately. He says he needs more time to train." Shi Feng nodded for him to continue. "And," Duguyan whispered, looking around, "whenever Shui Xing goes to the prince's mansion, he always brings Shui Beng along." "When does your grandfather go there again?" Shi Feng asked. "Tomorrow," Duguyan replied, his fist clenching at the thought of Shui Beng's fate. "That's our chance. I'll send word this afternoon or this evening with the final details." Duguyan bowed deeply. "Thank you, master." After seeing his young ally off, Shi Feng stopped at the market for vegetables and made his way back to his modest courtyard. Half the space was taken up by his laundry, clothes fluttering on lines like bright sails in the breeze. Shi Feng surveyed the steaming dishes laid out before him and smiled. "She's really got a knack for this," he praised Xiaoying, who beamed at the compliment. Just then, the young maid slipped into the kitchen, curiosity dancing in her eyes. "Master Shi, may I learn your cooking techniques?" she asked. Shi Feng nodded. The more she learned, the more he'd save on his own meals. "Of course. Let's start right away." After they finished eating, Shi Feng leaned back and asked, "Xiaoying, will Miss Renshui be in her chambers this afternoon?" Xiaoying bowed her head respectfully. "Her Highness usually takes a 1 to 2 hour rest after lunch." "And the rest of her time?" he pressed. "She greets her mother each morning, then accompanies her cousin, Princess Shui Ke, to the Emperor's court. Occasionally she visits the master at the Seven Treasures Glazed Tile Academy, and when she's free, she spends hours reading in her study." Shi Feng tapped his chin thoughtfully. So many duties, yet so little time for true cultivation. He stood and smoothed his robes. "Good, the plan is coming together. I'll go speak with her now." Xiaoying hesitated. Master Shi, it isn't necessary, he interrupted gently. Just let me know when she's ready. With that, he left the kitchen and made his way to the princess's quarters. He knew she would be resting after lunch, and he was eager to report his progress before she resumed her duties. Shi Feng fancied himself clever, but he still wanted to run the plan past Qian Renshui. Any loopholes they caught now could be sealed before they moved. Everything looks solid, he said at last, but in the end, it all depends on your loyal maid. Qian Renshui rose and stretched. In an instant, her form blurred and remade itself into Shui Qinghe, her martial spirit given human shape. The suave young man who stood before Shi Feng was nearly as handsome as he was, with a calm, gracious smile that felt like a soft spring breeze. I never guessed your martial spirit had such power, Shui Qinghe murmured. From now on, you mustn't think of me as Qian Renshui. Xiaoying will keep that in mind too. Shi Feng inclined his head. Understood. I won't slip up. His curiosity about their relationship cooled now that he'd seen her true nature. Bidding Sheiqing a farewell, he returned to his small courtyard to gather the supplies the scheme demanded. Tomorrow, everything would come into motion. Chapter 195. Just after noon, Shi Feng finally let himself rest. Since the trial, Sheiqing had scarcely left his mansion, and Shui Beng's only excursion was to the city's brothels. That afternoon, Shi Feng slipped out alone. He stocked up on 2 small vials of special medicine, then passed once more through the inner city gate and checked into a different inn. Before long, Du Guyan arrived. She was dressed in a figure-hugging silk skirt that accentuated every curve, her slender waist awe-roaching with breathtaking grace. Shi Feng found himself oddly parched, his pulse quickening at the sight. The moment she turned to him, Du Guyan noticed his flushed cheeks and the bead of sweat at his temple. His eyes gleamed with unwanted heat, and for an instant she felt as though he saw straight through her. Alarm flashed across her features. If Master Shi meant to indulge in unseemly passions, what could she do? Drawing on his inner strength, Shi Feng clamped down on the rogue effects of the aphrodisiac he'd bought. His martial cultivation flared, quelling the medicine's power. After a tense minute, the heat in his veins eased. He studied the 2 vials resting on the table and couldn't suppress a thrill of astonishment. I never imagined this concoction would be so potent against soul masters, he thought. If even I struggle to contain its effects, any ordinary cultivator would be utterly undone. Though he was highly resistant to toxins, this wasn't truly a deadly poison. It was more like an aphrodisiac. Du Guyan still leaned against the doorframe, brows knitted in concern. Come over and sit here, Shi Feng said, motioning to the chair beside him. Du Guyan perched at Shi Feng's side, her heart fluttering with unease. When she noticed 2 small vials resting on the table before her, curiosity overrode her nervousness. You'd better put these away, Shi Feng said, nodding toward the bottles. You'll need them tomorrow. Du Guyan picked up the smaller vial and squinted at its ornate label. Ladies' silver hundredweight? She frowned. Though she'd faced gunfire in battle, the name struck a chord of alarm. Catching her inquisitive look, Shi Feng met her eyes and gave a slow, solemn nod. These are aphrodisiacs, he explained. One is for you, the other for Shui Beng. Once it's taken effect, there will be no denying what happens. Its potency will be your proof. Her cheeks flamed at his frankness. Shi Feng's gaze slipped awkwardly to the floor. Even with his iron self-control, a drug this strong still stirred something primal within him. With his already formidable strength, the slightest rush of desire would feel like lifting 10,000 caddies. Noting the sudden tension in his posture, Du Guyan's embarrassment deepened until she could barely meet his eyes. Master, did you just test the potion on yourself? Shi Feng's expression remained unreadable, but in the silence that followed, Du Guyan realized just how serious and how dangerous these 2 vials truly were. Shi Feng nodded. I've acquired the enhanced version. I want to see exactly how this medicine affects a soul master. There can't be any mistakes in our plan. Du Guyan's eyes flickered with determination. If she wanted to avenge her best friend and put Shui Beng, the scoundrel, to justice, she had to know the pill's true power. Before Shi Feng could object, she seized the bottle of Silver Lady pills, poured one into her palm, and swallowed it whole. Shi Feng's brow furrowed. What are you doing? As you said, Master. Du Guyan replied steadily. Our plan must be flawless. I'll test the effects myself. He hesitated, then offered a curt nod. His disciple's loyalty and her courage were remarkable. All right, but if it becomes too much, tell me immediately. Understood. Duguyan inhaled deeply as the medicine took hold. Almost at once, a soft flush spread across her skin, tinting her cheeks a vivid rose. Her green eyes shimmered like rippling spring water. Master, I'm growing, overheated. Shi Feng stepped back, watching with clinical calm. Duguyan's body seemed to radiate warmth from within. Her voice dropped into a silken, almost erotic timbre as she shifted restlessly. Her legs quivered, crossing and uncrossing of their own accord. Master, I feel like she gasped, clutching her chest. I can't hold on much longer. Shi Feng remained silent, ready to intervene at the first sign of danger. The true test had begun. Shi Feng was no saint. As Duguyan's suppressed desires flickered back to life, he felt a stir within himself, yet his iron will held firm. Channel your spirit energy. Restrain it, he commanded in a low voice. Duguyan gave a brief nod, but the drug's potency soon overwhelmed her. This elixir, it's far stronger than I expected, she murmured, her eyes glazing over as her hand trembled at her side. Without hesitation, Shi Feng slipped around behind her. Placing his palm against the seal of her spirit on her back, he poured in a torrent of pure, commanding soul power. Bit by bit, the invasive medicinal energy dissolved under his control, until at last her senses cleared. Master, thank you, she whispered, her cheeks flushing a gentle pink. Until now, her devotion to him had been strictly professional, but in that moment, respect blossomed into sincere affection. Shi Feng had been not only just but unfailingly honorable, qualities she knew any other man might have lacked, choosing instead to exploit her vulnerability. Shi Feng gave a curt nod. You'll have to think on your feet tomorrow, and under no circumstances let Shuibeng take advantage of you. Duguyan offered a confident smile. Master, don't worry. I've got it handled. All right, you can go back now. I'll be observing every step of the mission tomorrow. Once you've finished, there's no need to report in immediately. I'll contact you if anything else comes up. Understood. Duguyan rose to her feet, though her legs still trembled slightly. She pushed open the hotel door and slipped out into the night. Once she was gone, Shi Feng exhaled and let his gaze drift downward. That potion really packs a punch. He winced, recalling the intensity of its effects. In his current condition, returning home would be impossible. Not only would passers-by stare in bewilderment, but encountering Xiaoying in this state might terrify her. He settled onto a nearby bench and began circulating his soul energy through the key meridians, carefully mending the internal damage. It took some time, but eventually his pulse steadied and the pain receded. Satisfied, he rose and crossed the street to buy a few simple provisions, then made his way back to the courtyard. Through the open window of Xiaoying's room, he could see the young girl deep in meditation, her focus absolute. Shi Feng allowed himself a small, approving smile. Her resolve was as impressive as ever. Chapter 7. The Relentless Training. Shi Feng paused in his instruction to check the time. All right, that's enough for now, he announced, sheathing his practice sword. Go get some rest. When you're fully recovered, we'll pick up where we left off. Xiaoying's eyes lit up. Understood, she replied, her excitement barely contained. The promise of learning real combat techniques from Shi Feng, whose reputation for martial skill was second to none, filled her with renewed determination. True to his word, Shi Feng stuck to a strict regimen. Train until you're exhausted, rest until you're fully healed, then repeat. Over the next several days, they met before dawn in the quiet courtyard behind the training hall. Shafts of morning light slipped through the bamboo grove as Shi Feng walked Xiaoying through stances, footwork, and defensive maneuvers. Each session ended with fierce sparring, during which he tested her reactions, corrected her missteps, and forced her to think on her feet. Time and again, Xiaoying met his strikes with valiant blocks, only to find herself unbalanced by a deft feint or overwhelmed by a sudden counterattack. She tasted defeat so often her muscles burned and bruises blossomed across her forearms. Yet every time she collapsed in a heap of frustration, Shi Feng was there to help her up, offering calm, precise guidance. Your guard falls too soon whenever you overcommit, he observed after one particularly harsh bout. Relax your shoulders. Let your center guide your movements, not your arms. He demonstrated, slow and deliberate, how to shift weight smoothly from one foot to the other. Then they resumed, strike, parry, circle, feint. Despite her sore limbs, Xiaoying felt something inside her click into place. Each loss taught her more about her own strengths and weaknesses than any theoretical lesson ever could. By the end of the week, Xiaoying's form had improved noticeably. Her footwork was steadier, her thrusts sharper, her defenses more intuitive. Although victories were still few, the margin of defeat narrowed each day. Shi Feng allowed himself a rare smile as he watched her bloom under pressure. "Tomorrow," he said as they stood beneath the setting sun, "we'll add weapon disarms and counter-grabs. But for tonight, rest well. You've earned it." Xiaoying nodded, exhaustion and exhilaration warring in her chest. She knew the path ahead would be long and hard, but with Shi Feng's unwavering mentorship, she felt ready for whatever challenges lay in store. Repeated battles had taught her this much. Lost once, ashamed today, conquer tomorrow. 2 hours later, Shi Feng emerged from the kitchen, wiping his hands on a clean towel. Qian Renshui had asked him to prepare more delicacies for her household, and of course he'd complied. He didn't mind. After all, once Xiaoying had mastered his recipes and techniques, he could step back and let her take over. He'd even begun teaching her how to manage every household task. Cooking, cleaning, massages, you name it. He had never before experienced being waited on so attentively, but the thought now held a certain appeal. That evening, he politely declined Xiaoying's offer to accompany him and set off alone, lunchbox in hand, for Qian Renshui's chambers. The moment he arrived, he found Qian Renshui was having her bath, so he didn't disturb her. Instead, he stepped into the long wooden corridor just outside her room. On either side, lotus-filled ponds stretched as far as the eye could see, their blossoms vivid against the clear summer water. A soft breeze rustled through the leaves, frogs croaked in the reeds, and here and there a carefully placed rockery or miniature garden offered a quiet corner of repose. Shi Feng paused to take it all in. The air was light, the scene unfailingly serene, and he knew immediately that he'd fallen in love with this place. It's tough for Shuer to hold the title of prince, but her residence is surprisingly pleasant. Shi Feng surveyed the compound. Only the row of pavilions belonging to Qian Renshui was occupied. The other chambers sat empty. Living here must be lonely, he thought, resolving immediately to move in as soon as he could. At least then, Qian Renshui wouldn't be so isolated. He steeled himself, took a small leap, and balanced on the tip of his toe atop a lotus leaf. With a swift bend, he reached out and plucked a single, perfect blossom. Cradling the flower in one hand, he slipped back inside the pavilion. Qian Renshui was already at the low table, eating in silence. Shi Feng's gaze fell on the main dish. Its centerpiece had been wiped clean. She hadn't shown any sign of emotion while devouring it, and he couldn't read her thoughts. "Shuer, this is for you." He offered her the lotus with a gentle smile. Its petals were soft pink, releasing a delicate fragrance. Qian Renshui glanced up, her dark eyes sharpening in a brief, unreadable glance. Then she returned to her meal, nibbling steadily as if nothing had happened. Undeterred, Shi Feng fetched a porcelain vase, filled it with water, and set the lotus inside. The blossom stood tall, its petals unfurling elegantly. Qian Renshui paused mid-bite and met his eyes. "Why didn't Xiaoying come today?" she asked, voice calm but curious. Chapter 196, Snowstar's Expectations. "She still can't accept losing to me, even though she's been training non-stop," Shi Feng said, using Xiaoying as his excuse. "Now, update me on the plan." With a mouth half full of food, Qian Renshui nodded eagerly. "It's on track. The avalanche barrier is about to collapse, and as soon as it does, Dugubo will have to leave Snowstar." Shi Feng smiled. "Perfect, and since Duguyan is his granddaughter, he'll never suspect foul play. Tomorrow is the decisive day. Come by first thing in the morning with any new developments." "All right." Shi Feng gathered Qian Renshui's empty dishes and handed them off to Xiaoying to wash. When he returned, he set a neat row of vials and pill bottles on the table, supplies he'd retrieved from the Soul Guide scroll. "Master asked me to bring you these." Qian Renshui didn't look at the medicine. Instead, she fixed Shi Feng with a sly, tilted gaze, her red lips gleaming. "Why are you calling me Shuer?" Shi Feng stood alone in the moonlit courtyard, watching the last lantern gutter into the night. Qian Renshui approached silently, her cloak whispering against the stone. Normally so decisive, whether in battle or in conversation, she wasted no time on small talk. With Xiaoying absent, Shi Feng knew this was his only chance to speak plainly. Renshui tilted her head, her dark eyes probing him. "Don't call me junior sister anymore." "Hisi." Aid, voice steady despite the pounding of his heart. She blinked, taken aback. "Then what would you have me call you?" For a moment he hesitated, his mind racing with all the unspoken emotions he'd kept locked away. But at that instant, cowardice was no longer an option. He squared his shoulders, met her gaze, and let the words fall freely. "My wife." Silence stretched between them like a held breath. Beneath the soft silver light, Renshui's features softened, astonishment giving way to something gentler. Warmth, perhaps hope. Shi Feng's confession hung in the air, honest and unguarded. In that instant, the decisive warrior and the reserved strategist stood equal before one another, bound by a promise neither had dared to voice until now. Qian Renshui slid the jade vial across the polished table toward Shi Feng. "Take this elixir. As my bodyguard, you'll face danger far more often than I will. It's safer if you carry it." Shi Feng paused instead of grabbing the vial. He met her gaze steadily. "So, you're willing?" She let out a soft sigh, her shoulders tensing. "Don't misunderstand. I simply don't have that kind of affection for you." A confident smile curved Shi Feng's lips. Feelings can be cultivated over time. Qian Renshui looked away, her fingers brushing her lips in a nervous gesture. "We'll talk about this later." Shi Feng's heart leapt. Despite her reservations, she hadn't shut him down completely. Shi Feng's next words depended entirely on his own resolve, and he wasted no time pressing the point. A playful smile tugged at his lips as he dropped another surprise. "Actually, both your mother and grandfather told me they hope you and I will end up together." "Really?" Qian Renshui's voice was calm, but her eyes flickered with interest. "Really. If you doubt it, you can write to them yourself." Qian Renshui nodded once. "I understand." She rose to her feet. "I'm going to practice now. You should head back and come early tomorrow." Shi Feng felt a twinge of disappointment. After all this talk, she still wouldn't give him a straight answer, but he knew better than to force the issue. He bowed and took his leave. No sooner had he gone than a faint, amused smile curved Qian Renshui's mouth. "That sly fox, daring enough to try and rattle me." Back in his small courtyard, Shi Feng showered and resumed his cultivation drills. Late that night, he heard Xiaoying's soft sobs drifting through the halls once again. At dawn, he gently roused her and showed her how to prepare breakfast. With steaming dishes in hand, the two of them set off toward the palace. Shi Feng and Xiaoying stepped quietly into the chamber. Qian Renshui was already awake. She'd finished her morning court and paid her respects to the queen before returning here. Closing the door behind them, she eyed Shi Feng for a moment, then slipped into the nearby bath. A few moments later, she re-emerged in her usual guise, her dark hair cascading over her shoulders. She shook out the damp strands and let out a long, frustrated sigh. "That binding last night was unbearable," she complained, rubbing at her wrists. Shi Feng offered a wry nod. "With a figure like yours, it would have been too easy to give you away." Qian Renshui shot him an exasperated look, then lowered her gaze to sip from a porcelain teacup. "I've already eaten. You two go ahead and have breakfast without me." She paused, setting the cup down. "Oh, and bring me back some supper tonight." After they'd finished eating, the three of them settled into a hushed vigil. Finally, Xiaoying could no longer contain her curiosity. "So, what's the plan?" Shi Feng outlined their strategy once more, careful to omit the true nature of his relationship with Du Guyan. While he spoke, Qian Renshui reached into her soul tool and produced a handful of melon seeds and roasted peanuts, offering them around. "These tributes are surprisingly tasty. Help yourselves." Xiaoying cracked open a seed and munched thoughtfully, then glanced at Qian Renshui. "Have they made a move yet?" Qian Renshui shook her head. "Not yet. Shui Beng has only just arrived at the prince's mansion. Be patient. We'll act when the time is right. Don't worry. I'll walk you through every step." With that, Dugu Bojia finished adjusting his hair and straightening his robes. He was all set to depart for the prince's mansion and meet Shui Xing. "Grandpa!" Dugu Yan bubbled up beside him, looping an arm around his. Her emerald green dress clung to her curves, matching the color of her eyes and dark hair. Though her features weren't what one would call classically stunning, her styling, youthful, coquettish, and utterly confident, drew every gaze. "Grandpa, can I come with you to the prince's mansion?" she asked, batting her lashes. Dugu Bojia chuckled and ruffled her hair. "You complained the last time that it was boring," he teased. Then, with a mischievous grin, he added, "But today I feel like doing a little shopping there. Shall we?" Her eyes lit up. "Okay, but we must be back by noon. I still have practice in the afternoon." Speaking of which, Dugu Yan looked up at him with concern. "Are you near a breakthrough in your cultivation, Grandpa?" "Almost," he admitted, a proud smile tugging at his lips. They made their way to the prince's mansion, a graceful pavilion rising from the center of the lake. Inside the gazebo, two figures sat across from one another at a round stone table. Shixing's gaze burned as she looked at Shui Bang's exhausted face, dark circles under his eyes, and every trace of energy drained away. Her fury was impossible to conceal. Shui Bang had done fine at the Royal Academy, but more than a month of summer vacation had clearly gone to his head. "Have you read the book I gave you?" Shui Xing asked in a tone that brooked no argument. Shui Bang hunched his shoulders. "I looked at it." "All right, then I'll quiz you." "Damn it, did you even read it?" Shui Xing's frustration boiled over. "I did, but I don't remember anything," Shui Bang admitted, shrinking under his uncle's furious glare. "I'm so angry." Shui Xing snapped. "There isn't a single prince or princess in the entire royal family as hopeless as you." His face reddened. Ever since Shui Bang had become infatuated with pretty faces, he'd been one disappointment after another, and this was the last straw. He let out a low sigh. "If you keep this up, I'm going to give up on you." Shui Bang's face fell at those words. He straightened in his seat and forced himself to speak earnestly. "Uncle, I promise, I've really been trying lately." Just then, Shui Xing glanced over and saw Dugu Bo walking along the far edge of the lake, his granddaughter Dugu Yan at his side. "I'd hoped you'd make a good impression on Dugu Bo," he said, shaking his head. "At this point, though, I'm not holding out much hope. Still, if you could win over his granddaughter, you'd have my full support." Shui Bang caught sight of Dugu Yan's graceful figure and felt his heart race. There was something wild and intoxicating in her every movement, her arrogance, her confidence. It all stirred his ambition to conquer her. He bit his lip and straightened his back. "Uncle, I'll do my best." He closed his eyes for a moment, recalling how he'd once courted Dugu Yan back at the academy. He'd been beaten to her heart by Yu Tianheng, who'd not only stolen her affections, but humiliated Shui Bang in front of everyone. That memory still stung, and a fierce determination flared within him. If it weren't for Yu Tianheng's immense power as the Blue Lightning Overlord of the Dragon Sect, Shui Bang swore he'd exact his revenge already. But for now, he would bide his time, and he would win. Chapter 197, Shi Feng's Fury. "If I can get Dugu Yan to sit by my side, I'll make Yu Tianheng green with envy." Shui Bang let his mind wander, picturing Dugu Yan leaning against him while Yu Tianheng looked on in rage. It was all pure fantasy, but that didn't stop him from grinning at the thought. "Brother Shi Feng, you've arrived," Shui Xing called, ushering Shi Feng into the pavilion. He glanced fondly at Dugu Yan. "You've been away so long, Yan." "Your Highness," Dugu Yan replied with a polite bow. "Brother Shi Feng," Shui Bang added hastily, almost stumbling over his words. Shi Feng simply nodded and followed them inside. Impatient, he'd much rather spend these next few hours in cultivation than in idle chatter. Once they were seated, Shi Xing chuckled and set a carved chessboard on the stone table. "Shi Feng, shall we play a few rounds today?" Dugu Yan pursed her lips, surveying the scene with curious eyes. From the corner of her vision, she caught Shui Bang staring so intently it was almost comical, his excitement barely contained. Dugu Yan rose gracefully and met his grandfather's gaze. "Grandfather, may I take a walk around the palace?" Before Dugu Bo could answer, Shui Xing eagerly spoke up. "By all means. There are many hidden gardens, pavilions, and corridors to explore. Shui Bang knows these grounds better than anyone. He'll show you around." With a playful shove, Shui Xing urged Shui Bang forward. The younger man sprang to his feet, a delighted smile lighting up his face as he bowed to Dugu Yan. "It would be my honor to accompany you." "I appreciate it," Dugu Yan replied, inclining his head politely. As the two departed, Shui Xing turned back to his father-in-law, amusement dancing in his eyes. "Father, Don't you think these two would make a fine match? Dugubo waved a hand dismissively. Yanyan is of age. He'll make his own choices. Xuexing chuckled. True enough. Matters of the heart rest with the young. Down the palace corridors, Duguyan moved with the light-hearted energy of a magpie, his emerald robe billowing around him. Every so often, he stooped to admire a bloom or study an ornate carving, and Shui Beng found himself caught by the exquisite grace of those movements. The way the silk draped and clung to Duguyan's lithe form stirred something deep within Shui Beng's chest, an urgent, possessive heat he struggled to control. As they strolled past marble columns and trickling fountains, Shui Beng forced himself to focus on pointing out interesting details. This hall was built in the first year of the last emperor's reign, and if you look closely here, you'll see the sculptor's signature hidden among the vines. Yet inside, his heart thundered, as though he wished he could mount, tee his steed, and ride off into the horizon with Duguyan at his side, claiming him in a single, impulsive moment. Shi Feng's cheeks burned as Duguyan spun around, catching him off guard. He hurriedly dropped his hand from his face, trying to shake off the flush of embarrassment. Duguyan laughed softly and flashed him a teasing wink, one that nearly made Shi Feng's knees go weak. He forced himself to stay composed. He knew better than to lose control here. Duguyan drifted closer, that porcelain-pale face only inches from his. Her voice was low and velvety as she murmured, "I know what you're thinking." A faint, sweet fragrance drifted from her, tightening the knot in Shi Feng's chest. He swallowed, heart-pounding. "Want to be with me?" she prompted, eyes bright with challenge. Before he could think it through, Shi Feng nodded, then immediately caught himself. "Wait, aren't you involved with Yu Tianheng?" Duguyan pressed Shi Feng's hand against his own chest and pouted. "He's been home for over a month since school let out, and he still hasn't come to find me. I'm so lonely." Her cheeks pinkened, and her eyes dropped shyly to the floor. Shi Feng's head spun. Swallowing hard, he managed. "Well, I could keep you company." He offered her a tentative smile, both anxious and hopeful. Duguyan looked up at him, the corner of her mouth curving into a satisfied little grin. Shi Feng's fingers tightened on Shui Beng's wrist. "Can you give me what I asked for?" he asked quietly. Shui Beng's coal-black eyes bulged as if they might burst from their sockets. His last scrap of reason slipped away. Voice shaking, he stammered, Yes, I can give you anything you want, but I'm still afraid of your poison." A slow, amused smile curved Shi Feng's lips. "Don't worry, I'll neutralize it." Overjoyed, Shui Beng wound an arm around Shi Feng's waist and guided him into the nearest vacant chamber. He moved quickly. He knew this wing of the prince's mansion well. Inside, Shui Beng began discarding the restraints he'd worn, breath coming faster with anticipation. Shi Feng watched him coolly. "Hold on," he said. From the folds of his robe, he produced 2 tiny vials. Shui Beng's eyes flicked to them, and he let out a low, eager chuckle. Shi Feng tipped out 3 minuscule pills onto the back of his hand. "Take these," he instructed. Without hesitation, Shui Beng scooped up 1 pill and swallowed it dry. He looked up, chest heaving. "With 2 more," Shi Feng murmured, his voice soft and coaxing, "you'll be free to leave by nightfall." Shi Feng watched in stunned silence as Shui Beng snatched up the last 2 experimental pills and swallowed them in 1 gulp, his eyes blazing with manic energy. Shi Feng knew he'd barely managed 1 dose before the side effects nearly floored him. How could Shui Beng, a hollow man, handle this enhanced version so easily? Behind him, Qian Renshui's gaze was hard and insistent. She nudged him forward, her posture leaving no room for refusal. It struck Shi Feng how terrifyingly ruthless a woman could be. He hesitated. "Take yours," Qian Renshui said softly. Shi Feng swallowed another pill. Almost instantly, a burning red aura flared around his body, setting his vision aglow. Shui Beng staggered to his feet, then turned and thrust a pill at Duguyan. "Your turn," he growled. Duguyan rolled her eyes but slipped the pill into her mouth. Within seconds, she too was wreathed in a fierce red light. Shui Beng's face registered equal parts awe and anticipation. He was ready to push them harder. But instead of lunging forward, Duguyan held up a hand, her expression calm. "Wait just a moment," she said. "What are you waiting for?" Shi Beng snarled, his aura flickering with impatience. Duguyan bent slightly, reached into her skirt, and produced a small, blood-stained object. With a single fluid motion, she wiped it clean on the fabric and then tucked it away. The casual precision of the gesture froze Shi Feng in his tracks. Shi Feng's breath caught. Even he, who had come expecting chaos, was floored by Duguyan's cold efficiency. The tension in the room spiked as all eyes lingered on the three of them, each wondering what would happen next. Startled when he suddenly halted, Qian Renshui hurriedly urged Shi Feng onward, but the moment the two girls understood what he'd just heard, their delicate features went ice-cold. Across the courtyard, Duguyan felt his mind shatter. Desperate, he unleashed a surge of spirit power and cried out, "Grandpa, help me!" His shrill, tortured scream cut through the air, carried even farther by his spirit enhancement. In the pavilion not far off, Douluo, whose spiritual perception was razor-sharp, froze mid-chess move. His face drained of blood, and in an instant he dashed toward the gazebo. At the same time, Spirit Hall disciple Shui Xing, no novice in cultivation, caught the faint echo of Duguyan's plea. His own complexion darkened. If anything happened to Duguyan under his roof, no amount of excuse would save him. Without hesitation, he sprinted after Dugubo. Back in the room, Shi Feng stood rooted to the spot, a tide of terror crashing through him. His heart thundered, his breaths came in desperate gasps, and for a moment it felt as though the very sky threatened to cave in. Shi Feng's fleeting desire was instantly replaced by the terror of imminent death. He didn't pause to adjust his torn garments. Instead, he bolted for the door. But before he could reach it, the heavy double doors exploded inward with a thunderous bang. Dugubo stormed into the chamber. The moment his eyes fell on Shui Beng and his granddaughter's battered condition, his face went pale with fury. "Grandpa, save me!" Duguyan shrieked, her blood-stained skirt clinging uncomfortably around her hips. The potent medicine coursing through her veins had ravaged her nerves, leaving her on the brink of collapse. Without hesitation, Dugubo rushed forward, braced a huge hand atop Duguyan's head, and channeled his majestic soul power into her. Gradually, the haze in her eyes lifted as consciousness returned. Moments later, Shuiyan collapsed into her grandfather's arms, her sobs racking her body, tears streaming down her cheeks. She needed no words for him to understand what had been done. Dugubo's gaze snapped to Shui Beng, his eyes as cutting as drawn knives. A terrifying, murderous aura erupted from him, instantly chilling the air as though winter had descended upon the room. Chapter 198, The Tragic Avalanche. "I'll kill you." Dugubo snarled, shoving Duguyan forward as he barreled toward Shui Beng, his massive hand whipped up, ready to strike. "Brother Dugu, have mercy." Prince Shui Xing's frantic voice cut through the tension as he stormed into the chamber. He skidded to a halt at the sight before him. Duguyan's once splendid robes were soaked through with blood, crimson rivulets dripping steadily onto the floor. For a moment, Shui Xing stood frozen, his mind reeling at the horror of it all. But the blood of princes runs deep. In the space of a heartbeat, he forced himself to calm. End of excerpt. Shi Feng stood at the edge of the courtyard, watching the scintillating glow of the stone altar fade under the midday sun. Before him knelt Shui Beng, completely exposed and trembling, as Dugubo's cold gaze never wavered. "Brother Dugu," Shui Xing stammered from behind Shi Feng, stepping forward with a pleading look. "Isn't my reputation worth something? How about sparing him?" Dugubo's reply was like ice. "Reputation means nothing here. This snake will die today." Shui Beng let out a terrified howl. "I didn't do it. I'm innocent." "Lies!" Shui Xing snarled, kicking Shui Beng's side so hard the naked man rolled across the stone tiles. Blood still stained the girl's dress by the altar, vivid evidence of his crime. Shui Beng's protestations rang hollow under such damning proof. Dugubo raised an eyebrow at Shi Feng, his blade already dripping. Shi Feng's heart hammered. If Dugubo gave the order, Shui Beng would be dead before the blade even touched him. Shui Xing dropped to one knee, voice urgent. "You once promised me a favor, Brother Dugu. Spare him now. Let me call in my debt." Dugubo's lips curled in disdain. "Your debts are meaningless to me." Shi Feng took a step forward, his eyes locked on Dugubo's. He had come here to uncover the truth, not to witness a cold-blooded execution. Steadying his voice, he said, "Master Dugu, if he dies, the sole witness to the truth is gone. Is that justice?" For an instant, the only sound was the girl's ragged breathing. Then Dugubo's blade dropped, narrowly missing Shui Beng's throat by inches. "Fine," he said at last. But if he escapes, I'll hunt him down myself. And you, he fixed Shuixing with a glare, will pay the price. Shuixing exhaled, relief flooding his features. Shi Feng clenched his fists. The man before them was alive for now, but the real trial was only just beginning. Shi Feng stood in the dimly lit audience hall, bound at the wrists, his cloak dust-covered from the road. Above him, the carved wooden beams gleamed in the torchlight, and the walls seemed to close in with each heartbeat. The charge was grave. He had refused the emperor's order to save a noble's life. If found guilty, the punishment would surely be severe. At the raised dais stood Duke Douluo, his face as hardened as the jade seal at his belt. Beside him knelt Shi Feng's accusers, General Shui Xing and his young son, Shui Beng. The duke's own granddaughter, Lady Dugu Yuhua, hovered just out of the glare, her expression one of terrified innocence. Duke Douluo's cold eyes swept over Shi Feng before flicking to his granddaughter. This man stubbornly disobeyed his majesty's command. Perhaps that alone is enough to seal his fate, he said. Then, lowering his voice, he added, but let's be frank, my granddaughter's virtue is worth more than any favor this man might claim. General Xing swallowed uneasily. He had expected some leniency, but not outright condemnation. He cleared his throat. Your Grace, tragedies have unfolded, yes, but is it so unimaginable that a bond might form between Shi Feng and Lady Yuhua? A marriage could reconcile the families and spare his life. Douluo laughed, a harsh, humorless sound. Marriage? You propose to sully my granddaughter's innocence for the sake of this insolent stranger? He slammed a fist on the lectern. I'll not have her reputation sullied, nor will I be pressured by toads salivating at swan's meat. He turned back to Shi Feng, leaning on his cane. Very well. I'll offer you a choice. Your life in exchange for one more favor. But you shall pay the ultimate price in another way. For your crime of defiance, you will be made a eunuch, doomed to serve in the palace for the rest of your days. Shui Beng's shoulders shook with sobs. He crept forward, kneeling at Shi Feng's feet and clasping his father's robes. Tears and snot streaked his face. Father, please, he's already suffered enough. If he becomes a eunuch, it is worse than death. Shui Xing's jaw clenched, his face paling. He shot a warning look at Douluo. Uncle, if you press this, if you truly insist on castration, you will make yourself an irreparable enemy of the imperial family. Are you not afraid of our army, of 1,000,000 blades raised against you? Douluo's eyes glittered with contempt. Afraid? I am the emperor's right hand. I answer to no mortal force but his majesty. Do you think your threats can sway me? Silence fell like a shroud. Shi Feng, kneeling with his back straight, lifted his chin. He met Douluo's gaze without flinching. If I must give up all that makes me a man to atone for my loyalty to the throne, then so be it, he declared, voice steady. But know this, the choice you make today will echo through the court long after we are gone. A hushed tension gripped the chamber. The duke's lips twitched, as though weighing whether to smile or sneer. Outside, torches flickered against the night, but within, hearts burned hotter than any flame. No soul present left any doubt. This trial had become a clash of wills, and only the emperor's final word could settle it. Douluo's eyes blazed as he squared his shoulders. I'm not afraid of any of you, he thundered. His granddaughter, Douluo, trembled at his side, her voice barely above a whisper. Grandpa, please let's just go home. I don't want to be involved with any of this anymore. Douluo felt a pang of guilt at her frightened look. The standoff before them had grown pointless. He reached out and gently squeezed Yan's shoulder. Yan, I swear I'll never let you suffer. Then let's leave, she urged, pulling him toward the exit. Seeing her weakened state, his heart clenched with protectiveness. All right, he relented. Let's go home. He wrapped an arm around her and began to step away, but then stopped, wheeling back to face the assembled nobles. His voice dropped to a cold, measured growl. Shuixing, mark my words. We have no more business with you, but if you ever provoke me again, I won't hesitate to move against the emperor himself. Shuixing's face went pale. He'd been reckless to challenge Douluo, like dancing on a razor's edge, and suddenly realized how close he'd come to disaster. At his feet, Shui Beng knelt, clutching Shuixing's robes in terrified supplication. Rage and fear warred in Shuixing's chest, but he dared not speak a word. Douluo's warning hung in the air like a blade. Shi Feng kicked Shui Beng so hard he tumbled across the courtyard. I know women. Are you completely out of your mind? He thundered. The 3 potent pills coursing through Shui Beng's veins had already scrambled his brain. His face went deathly pale, his eyes bloodshot and bulging. Uncle, just 3 pills cost me 100 taels. Find me a woman now, or I swear I'll burst. He lunged for a nearby wooden pillar, as though clinging to it might save him from his own desires. Xu Xing's fury shook the air. His long beard quivered, his chest rising and falling with rage. Enough of this nonsense. He struck the pillar with such force that deep cracks spidered through the wood. 2 Soulmaster rank guards blanched and nearly collapsed under the lingering pressure of his titled Douluo aura. Bind him and lock him in the woodshed for 3 days and nights, Shi Feng ordered. We'll see if solitary confinement cures his urges. Yes, master, the guard stammered, seizing Shui Beng. Uncle, please, I can't, Shui Beng screamed as they tightened his bonds. With a final howl, he was dragged off to the woodshed, the heavy door thudding shut behind him. The courtyard fell silent once more, save for the faint echo of Shui Beng's protests. Shui Xing's face hardened. Lock him in the stable, he ordered, voice low and dangerous. Let's see if he's got the nerve to try that again. He knew that only a lesson seared into memory would break his nephew of this reckless habit. Please, no. Shui Beng's cry tore through the air as 2 burly guards sprang forward and seized him. Terror turned to frenzy. He snapped his teeth into one guard's arm and swung wildly at the other, his panic driving him into a savage lunge. Only after the spirits of the 2 guards were expelled did they bind Shui Beng, haul him into the stable, and lock the door behind him. Although he held the title of prince, Shui Beng possessed neither real power nor loyal followers. His own guards dared not defy the orders that came from higher authorities. Not long after, the thunder of hooves faded into the distance. Dugu Bo and his granddaughter, Dugu Yan, made their way home. Yan's cheeks were flushed and her breathing shallow. Worry creasing his brow, Dugu Bo spoke softly. Yan, I think grandfather should call a soul-healing master to examine your wounds. Dugu Yan shook her head. No, Grandpa, I'll manage them myself. With a curt nod, she slipped inside and closed her door. Left alone in the empty corridor, Dugu Bo's frustration flared. He wanted to storm the prince's mansion and demand justice, but he forced himself to wait. More than 10 minutes passed before Yan re-emerged, her color remarkably recovered. Though she claimed to have treated her injuries, all she'd actually done was clean and rebandage them. Still, to Du Bo, and to their benefactor, Shui Xing, it was Yan's spirit, her very essence, that had suffered most in the struggle. Dugu Bo sighed and laid a gentle hand on her shoulder. Pack your things. Shui Xing provided this house for us, but it's too exposed. We're moving to the outer city. Yan met his gaze as he continued. I've already purchased a courtyard there. It's secure, and we can finally settle down without fear. With that, father and daughter set about preparing for the journey that would lead them away from the shadows of the prince's machinations and toward a safer new beginning. As for what comes next, he's already planning to head for Wuhun City. Inside the imperial palace, in Crown Princess Qian Renshui's private chambers, the atmosphere was unusually tense. Qian Renshui's normally bright, composed features had dimmed to disbelief as she stared at Shi Feng. Shui Xing actually locked Shui Beng in the stables? Shi Feng shook his head. Yes, and thankfully, only he and his personal guards know the truth. Shui Beng won't dare reveal such a scandal. A soft chuckle escaped him. Honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if Shui Beng ends up as a Yang Wei. A Yang Wei? Both Qian Renshui and her handmaid, Xiao Ying, echoed the term in unison, confusion evident in their voices. Shi Feng had a knack for coining bizarre expressions the first time you heard them. He held up a patient hand. Literally, it means a silver spear on the head, but there's no real weapon or magic behind it. It's just an old joke I picked up. Qian Renshui's cheeks flushed with annoyance as she turned away. Ugh, men and their meaningless games. Xiao Ying scowled too, but after a moment's thought, she furrowed her brow. Then why did Shui Beng lose that, whatever it was, ability the moment he was locked in the stables? Shi Feng glanced at the princess, then leaned close to whisper in Xiao Ying's ear. The handmaid's eyes widened as she absorbed the explanation. The stable's turbulent spiritual qi had disrupted Shui Beng's nascent talent, suppressing it until he was removed from that environment. When Shi Feng sat back, both women were staring at him, a new urgency in their expressions. Qian Renshui rose gracefully, resolve shining in her dark eyes. If Shui Beng really possesses a rare gift, we can't leave him be. We must find a way to test and train him properly. Shi Feng nodded. Exactly. That's why I'm setting out for Wuhan City. Their ancient archives and specialized instructors know how to regulate spiritual qi. If Shui Beng's talent is genuine, they'll be the ones to unlock it. Xiao Ying sprang to her feet. Then let's make our preparations at once. As dawn approached, an unlikely trio formed in the candlelit chamber. A crown princess determined to save a young man's fate, her loyal maid, and Shi Feng, the resourceful prodigy who held the key to Wuhan City's long-buried secrets. Their journey was about to begin. Chapter 199, The Perfect Crime. Xiao Ying's eyes flew wide. Are you sure we can do this? Shi Feng's gaze was cold and resolute. It has to be done. Once word spreads that Shui'er is the murderer, Du Gubo and Shui Xing will never stop hunting her. They both stand in the way of everything we're trying to accomplish. They must die. Qian Renshui slammed her fist on the table, rattling the teacups. You heard him. Du Gubo and his nephew have crossed a line from which there is no return. Our next priority is figuring out how to eliminate them without leaving any trace. No mistakes, no rumors. If the royal family members keep dropping dead, someone is bound to start asking questions. And if they start looking for a scapegoat, who do you think they'll find? Shi Feng paused, gathering his thoughts. At last he spoke. Remember what we talked about earlier. Once rumors spread that Shui Xing threw Shui'er into the royal stables, his reputation will be in ruins. We can exploit that. Paint him as a cruel monster who violated imperial law by imprisoning the granddaughter of Shui Beng Changbao, an honored Douluo, in a filthy stall. Qian Renshui's eyes lit up. Yes, that disgrace alone is enough to turn the entire empire against him. If we fan those flames, add a few details about how he treated her inhumanely, how the scandal shamed the royal house, everyone will believe Shui Xing's fall was deserved. He'll be untouchable politically, and no one will come looking for the real culprit when he dies. Shi Feng nodded. Exactly. We amplify every accusation, leak them to the court, the nobles, even the commoners. By the time we act, public opinion will have already condemned them. Their deaths will look like divine justice, not a murder plot. Xiao Ying swallowed hard but managed to steady her voice. And the Duke and his nephew will die thinking they were just victims of a backlash? Shi Feng offered a thin, grim smile. Precisely. We strike when the uproar over Shui Xing's disgrace is at its peak. By then, everyone will be too busy celebrating his downfall to question how he and his uncle actually met their end. A hush fell over the room as the three conspirators contemplated the final, deadly stroke of their plan. The empire would scream, but no one would ever know the truth. The perfect crime was within their grasp. Shi Feng leaned back, folding his arms. Even if Shui Xing somehow survives this, we'll strip him of his title and send him into exile. Dealing with him afterward will be child's play. Qian Renshui tapped her chin thoughtfully. And without Shui Xing, the Avalanche sect loses its greatest asset. Their threat evaporates almost overnight. It's a solid plan, Shi Feng agreed, but we have to be careful how we spin this. Public opinion can make or break us. Renshui's gaze sharpened. Over the next few days, keep a close watch on Shui Xing and Shui Beng. Look beyond their two loyal guards. There could be other sympathizers at court. For the right price, people talk. A slow smile spread across Shi Feng's face. You won't have to bribe half the capital. With all the commotion in the stables, Shui Beng's roaring fit of excitement, everyone's already whispering about them. Renshui's lips curled in distaste. Then why don't we just go see it ourselves? Why wait? Shi Feng rose. Strike while the iron is hot. Renshui hesitated, then scowled. How tedious. Shi Feng chuckled. Renshui, you've lived in the Tiando Empire all your life. Surely you've never taken a stroll through Tiando City's marketplaces? The princess shook her head, her expression cool. A royal princess can't be seen loitering among commoners. Exactly why we should, Shi Feng said with a mischievous glint. Sometimes the best way to understand the people and our enemies is to walk among them. With that, he swept from the room, leaving Qian Renshui to consider the unorthodox strategy and the dangerous game they were about to play. I'd like to show you the sights of Tiando City today. You haven't got any pressing matters, have you? Qian Renshui hesitated. I should stay close by, just in case small Eon comes looking for me. Shi Feng gave her a reassuring smile. Don't worry. I've left our little black sparrow to watch over the palace gates. If the old emperor sends anyone after you, I'll know immediately. Her heart softened. Qian Renshui had spent nearly all her youth confined within the palace walls, her noble rank a gilded cage that dictated every moment of her life. She'd worn the duties and expectations of the royal family like shackles, and never seen the world beyond. Just then, a soft flutter of wings drew their attention. A sleek black sparrow swooped in, perching lightly on the table between them. Its bright eyes regarded them both as if it understood every word that had been spoken. Qian Renshui reached out and ran a gentle finger along its glossy feathers, her surprise plain on her face. A bird can really serve as your eyes? She whispered. Shi Feng nodded. More than that. Wherever it goes, I see. Whenever it spies danger, I can send help in an instant. You're perfectly safe, I promise. As Qian Renshui gazed at the sparrow, a flicker of excitement and something like hope shone in her eyes. The world outside the palace gates suddenly felt a little less distant. Shi Feng didn't give her a chance to refuse. Let's go, he said, hauling Qian Renshui to her feet and slipping through the hidden passage. She wrenched her wrist, trying to break free, but his grip was unyielding. At last she surrendered and let him pull her inside. Behind them, Xiaoying scurried in and clicked the entrance shut. Shi Feng offered a reassuring smile. Don't worry, even if someone's looking for you, we'll be back in 10 minutes. He gave her a conspiratorial nod. Today is just for fun. No business, no obligations. Qian Renshui shot him an exasperated look. You're the only one who comes up with ideas this reckless. Xiaoying, meanwhile, could hardly contain herself. Miss, you haven't stepped outside in years. There's so much to see and so many delicious treats. Promise you'll let me show you around? Finally free of palace walls, Qian Renshui allowed herself a small, amused smile. As they wandered into the bustling streets, Shi Feng stopped at every stall that caught her eye, buying silken handkerchiefs, mooncakes, candied fruits, anything that made her pause and smile. The trio's laughter and bright clothes drew countless stares, especially toward Qian Renshui, whose pale beauty seemed almost otherworldly. Time and again, would-be suitors, like bees drawn to nectar, approached with bows and fluttering compliments. Each was swiftly warded off by Shi Feng's protective glare and a firm, "Please step aside." 10 minutes later, with pockets full of treats and hearts light with freedom, Qian Renshui found herself savoring every second of this stolen adventure. Qian Renshui's skirt billowed around her as she danced down the boulevard, her porcelain features alight with a girl's unguarded joy. In all her years, she had never been so carefree. Today was her very first shopping excursion. No schemes to weave, no burdens to shoulder, no worries to plague her, and she reveled in every moment of it. Every now and then, she stole a shy glance at Shi Feng walking by her side. It was this handsome young man who had filled her life with so many tender, glittering moments. When she focused on him, everything else faded away. His exact age, his quiet confidence, even the weight of her own reputation. All that remained was the simple, profound happiness he inspired in her heart. Over the years, every smile she'd managed to summon, every laugh that had broken through her guarded reserve, had come from him. Without Shi Feng, she knew her days would have been dark and full of regret. With him, she felt as though her life was finally unfolding in color. Shi Feng sensed her furtive glances but said nothing. He simply allowed himself a small, satisfied smile. In that silent exchange, he recognized something new and beautiful stirring in Qian Renshui. The proud, luminous goddess everyone else admired was beginning to fall for him. Shi Feng's eyes suddenly sparkled with mischief as his large hand closed over Qian Renshui's soft palm. Before she could even draw a breath, he threw back his head and laughed. Come on, I've got something to show you. With that, he took off at a jog, tugging Qian Renshui along. Behind them, their guide Xiaoying hurried after, her carefully arranged skirt flaring as she panted to keep up. Her pursed lips fluttered with every step, trying to call them back, but Shi Feng didn't spare her a glance, nor did Qian Renshui, and Xiaoying's cheeks flushed with the sudden realization that she'd been all but forgotten. Meanwhile, Qian Renshui's heart hammered in her chest. Shi Feng's firm, surprisingly warm grip sent a thrill up her arm, as if she'd been jolted by electricity. She tugged at his fingers, but they held her like iron gauntlets. They threaded out of the crowded shopping district and into a quieter, upscale neighborhood. After a few turns, Shi Feng finally slowed, bringing Qian Renshui to a stop in front of an elegant courtyard. He released her hand and flashed a teasing grin. "Here we are," he said softly. "Wait until you see what I found." Chapter 7. Echoes in the stable night had settled over the nor, but the flickering torchlight in the courtyard still painted restless shadows across the stone walls. Shi Feng guided Qian Renshui and Xiaoying to a darker corner, his voice low and urgent. Qian Renshui jerked her arm free, her chest heaving with indignation. "What exactly are you planning to show us?" Xiaoying's breath came in quick, uneasy puffs as she stared at him. Suspicion danced in her dark eyes. Shi Feng held up a finger, motioning for silence. His gaze sharpened. "Listen." From beyond the lantern-lit corridor came a sudden, frantic chorus of neighs, hoarse, panicked cries that echoed off the stable's timbered walls. Both women froze. Qian Renshui and Xiaoying exchanged horrified looks. They recognized the stallion's distinctive distress. "It's been hours," Renshui whispered, fear creeping into her voice. "How is he still thrashing about? Xuexing would have dealt with him by now." Shi Feng's lips curved into a faint, knowing smile. Xuexing had urgent business elsewhere tonight. In the chaos, he must have forgotten his nephew's pet. No one's brave enough to approach the stables at the moment. Why don't we slip inside and see what we're dealing with? Slip inside the stables? Are you mad? Renshui's eyes widened. She tried to yank her arm away again, but Shi Feng held her gently yet firmly. Strange as it was, she felt a small surge of comfort in his steadiness. Xiaoying let out an exasperated sigh, folding her arms. "You're being reckless and gross." Shi Feng chuckled softly. He pointed toward the massive, double doors at the end of the corridor, where the baying grew louder still. "This is Shi Beng's vengeance for betraying the family trust. When that stallion finally comes out of his frenzy, he'll believe he's living in his own nightmare. I'd rather know what we're up against." Renshui shot him a warning look. "If you get us killed, Feng, trust me," he interrupted with a wink. "A little danger makes for a good story." Steeling themselves, the three slipped toward the stable's threshold. Beyond the crack in the wood, the night trembled with the stallion's wild cries, and the air smelled of sweat and panic. Whatever waited inside, they would face it together. He'll dream of that stable every night. Qian Renshui's lips curved with disdain. "A man like him deserves to die. Better that he perishes here, burdened by guilt, especially Xuexing." Xiaoying, her sharp-tailed swift, circled overhead, eyes fixed on Xuexing's every move. Shi Feng frowned. "It could happen. Even my enhanced body couldn't withstand the drug. How much less his? He swallowed 3 doses. I'm afraid he really might die." Renshui nodded slowly. "They call it the instant gale pill. Apt name, isn't it?" Her playful mask slipped away as she studied him. "How do you know so much about it?" He ran a hand through his hair, looking sheepish. I only heard rumors. But you know me. After all I've endured these past years, my body and soul have somehow stayed clean." Renshui straightened, raising her porcelain chin. "Keep watching him, then," she called to her swift. "Xiaoying, let's go." The bird chirped, and together they vanished into the drifting snow. Chapter 200. Race Against Time. Evening was falling as Shi Feng, Qian Renshui, and Xiaoying made their way back toward the outer city. Flickering lanterns lined the streets, hinting at the night ahead. Shi Feng glanced at Renshui and suggested with a warm smile, "Renshui, why don't you return to the palace first? Stay for dinner before you head off." A soft blush touched her cheeks. She'd been curious to taste his cooking ever since his boast about how delicious his dishes were. "All right," she replied, her voice gentle. "I'll come over after dinner." When they reached Rengshui's courtyard, the heavy gates swung open. Maids waited silently at each doorway, only stepping inside if summoned with urgent news. Renshui ushered Shi Feng in and retrieved his garments, neatly folded and ready for laundering. She handed them to an attendant, then led them to a small pavilion set aside for private meals. Every few days, Renshui collected her own close-fitting dresses and entrusted them to Xiaoying for laundering, the same as she did with her delicate accessories and linens. Xiaoying managed all those details with quiet efficiency. Before parting ways, the trio stopped at the bustling vegetable market just outside the palace grounds. Stalls overflowed with fresh greens, roots, and aromatic herbs. As they moved from vendor to vendor, Shi Feng pointed out tips to Xiaoying. Choose cabbage with firm, vibrant leaves. Avoid any with wilted edges, he instructed, picking up a crisp head and inspecting it. And always give your ginger a good sniff. The sharper the scent, the fresher it is. Xiaoying nodded, jotting mental notes as Renshui selected bundles of lotus root, spring onions, and mushrooms. Shi Feng glanced at his comrades with satisfaction. Once he and Renshui took up residence in the palace, he had no doubt that Xiaoying would continue to bring them homemade meals, tiny reminders of home amid the dynasty's rigid halls. As daylight faded, the urgency in Shi Feng's heart deepened. Their mission was only beginning, and every moment now counted in this race against time. Shi Feng stood behind Qian Renshui at the kitchen counter, guiding her hand as she learned to cook. She'd never set foot in a kitchen before, let alone prepared a meal, and she was all smiles as she sprinkled in the salt. "Yes, that's perfect," he encouraged. "Now, with your left hand, add a bit more." As the savory aroma rose from the pan, Shi Feng's right hand stayed on hers, while his left drifted toward her slender waist. Before he realized what he'd done, Qian Renshui's hand shot up in a sharp slap. She turned, eyes flashing. "Step away," she ordered, her voice cool. He chuckled and obediently slid to the side. From the doorway, Xiaoying watched with a triumphant grin. "What are you staring at?" Shi Feng called back. "Crank up the flame a little more." Pouting, Xiaoying did as she was told, and soon the pan crackled louder. When Qian Renshui finally tasted the dish, she closed her eyes in delight. This is delicious," she pronounced, pride lighting her features. Shi Feng sampled a bite himself. It wasn't quite the same flavor he got, but he stayed silent, letting her bask in her success. At last, Qian Renshui tapped her chopsticks together and fixed him with a curious look. "By the way," she said, "what's going on with Shi Feng?" Shi Feng sensed the shift in energy and allowed himself a satisfied smile. "It seems this fourth prince really is going to make history, becoming the first royal to fall in battle in the Heaven Do Empire." Qian Renshui's eyes widened. "It's still going on? Nearly 10 hours have passed. Even the strongest soul masters would lose half their life force after such a marathon struggle, let alone contending with an avalanche." He nodded. When Xuexing rode out, he brought along only the 2 guards who knew the truth and ordered everyone else to keep their distance. So despite all the noise, no one truly knows what's happening inside. Renshui frowned. If Shui Beng really died in there, Xuexing won't hesitate to eliminate anyone who can oppose him. "That's why we must move now," Shi Feng said, urgency creeping into his tone. "I'll go to the temple and ask Solace to dispatch a small team of specialists to slip into the prince's mansion. If Xuexing plans to dispose of those 2 guards, we need to protect them. Without their testimony, we lose our only leverage." Even if Shui Beng survived, the scandal of her disappearance would be enough to strip Xuexing of his princely title. If she perished, his downfall would be all but guaranteed. Xuexing had badly miscalculated the strength of those 300 caddy venting pills. He'd used the standard recipe before and knew that once the pent-up energy was released, there'd be no lasting harm. He assumed that after the Qi avalanche subsided, he could simply walk away. But Shi Feng's specially upgraded formula was in an entirely different league. Even an advanced soul master couldn't withstand its effects. 3 pills alone were enough to thrust Xuexing into a prolonged state of frenzied release. Watching him closely, Shi Feng noticed Xuexing had already vented his anger several times, and now, with his internal reserves critically depleted, he was fighting for his life. The situation had become dire. Without hesitation, Qian Renshui rose from her seat and dashed into Xiaoying's room, intent on securing more pills. Shi Feng quickly set down his chopsticks. "I'll finish up here," he called after her. He paused only to tussle Xiaoying's hair, then hurled himself down the corridor like a gale. His plan was to accompany Qian Renshui on her rounds, and if luck favored them, to run into Solace along the way. Shi Feng's arrival took Qian Renshui by surprise. She glanced over her shoulder, eyes flashing. "Shi Feng, why are you here?" "I haven't met Solace yet," he replied without breaking stride. "I'm coming with you." Before she could respond, Qian Renshui poured her soul power into acceleration. Her form blurred, wings of light flaring at level 59, only a hair's breadth from breakthrough. Shi Feng grunted in challenge, tapping into the fabled 3,000 thunder steps taught by the Soul Sect. In a crackle of thunder, he snapped to her side, sliding an arm around her slim waist. The sudden heat of his grip pressed against her abdomen, but Qian Renshui dared not pull away. Time was slipping through their fingers. If Xuexing returned home to discover Shui Beng dead, the two palace guards would be condemned. Ahead lay the Holy Hall, nestled deep within the inner city, far closer than the imperial palace. Racing past moonlit rooftops and silent streets, their combined speed carved a streak of light across the sky. Barely 2 minutes later, Shi Feng gently released his hold. Qian Renshui steadied herself, heart pounding, as they arrived before the temple's grand bronze doors. The hush of the inner courtyard greeted them, and somewhere inside, Solace waited. They had made it, just in time. Shi Feng stepped through the hidden door, his footsteps silent on the smooth stone floor, as Qian Renshui flipped the concealed switch. Inside Solace's study, the Grand Inquisitor was immersed in scrolls and records. At the faint click of the mechanism, he looked up in surprise. In one fluid motion, the great bookcase swung aside, revealing the pair. Solace's eyes widened at the sight of Qian Renshui. She was the granddaughter of Qian Douluo, heir to the Heaven Du Empire's throne, and only in the gravest of emergencies would she approach him personally. The young man at her side, however, was completely unfamiliar. "Who is this?" Solace asked, his tone sharp with curiosity. Qian Renshui met his gaze steadily. "He is Shi Feng, the new Holy Son." Shi Feng inclined his head and produced the imperial token, its silver crest glinting in the lamplight. Qian Renshui wasted no time. In concise, urgent words, she laid out their plan. Immediately dispatch 2 masters skilled in concealment. They must infiltrate Xuexing's palace and gather whatever intelligence they can, then improvise as the situation demands. Solace studied Shi Feng's token again, then met Qian Renshui's eyes. Recognizing the gravity of her request, he nodded once. "It will be done. If Prince Shui Beng truly is dead, make sure those 2 palace guards are saved." Solace pressed the royal token back into Shi Feng's hand. "Your Highness, we'll discuss the details later." With that, he hurried off, his face grim. Prince Xuexing now even suspected Qian Renshui of murdering the 2 princes. It was a crisis that demanded immediate resolution. Qian Renshui turned to Shi Feng. "Has Xuexing returned yet?" "Not yet," she pressed on. "And what about Avalanche? Dead?" Shi Feng shook his head. "He's down, but still breathing. The other warhorses are down as well." At last, Qian Renshui let out a slow, steady breath. In her mind, the best possible outcome had come true. Shui Beng lay dead, and her men would soon free the 2 guards during Xuexing's attack. Even if Shui Beng somehow survived, they now held the means to expose the plot and disgrace Xuexing. He would be stripped of his rank, cast out of Tiando City, and without any proof, dare not accuse Qian Renshui for fear of losing his life. Shi Feng had merely intended to sever Xuexing's ties to the warlord Dugu Bo, but in his fury, Xuexing had dug a pit from which he could never climb out. Neither Shi Feng nor Qian Renshui had imagined things unfolding this way. The 2 sat in silence. After a moment, Solace returned. The stern look on his face had softened, a clear sign that everything was in place. "Your Highness, the arrangements are complete," he announced quietly. 2 Contra-level operatives, both experts in stealth, have already infiltrated Xuexing Palace. Solace's aged features bore a relieved smile. Qian Renshui exhaled at last. With a Contra-level Soul Master in the field, there was little chance of things going awry. "Thank you, Lord Bishop," she said. "Your assistance is invaluable. Once this mission succeeds, your contribution will be remembered." Solace bowed respectfully. "I am merely doing my duty." Though his title placed him below Qian Renshui in rank, Bibi Dong had personally summoned him to Tiando City to lend his aid. Qian Renshui returned his bow with a slight nod. Then she turned to Shi Feng and said, "It was you who uncovered the secrets of Xuexing and Shui Beng, proposed this plan, and carried it out. We owe this success to you. When you report to the Holy Palace later, be sure to record his contributions." Bishop Solace paused, taken aback, and peered at Shi Feng with new interest. In that moment, his respect for this holy son soared. "Your Highness truly has remarkable insight and thoughtfulness." he praised. Salas was well aware that Shi Feng was the Pope's favored disciple and most likely his successor. A secret dispatch had revealed that the Pope himself had sent the Holy Son to assist Qian Renshui, underscoring just how highly he prized Shi Feng's service. Cultivating a good relationship with him was essential. Shi Feng inclined his head in acknowledgement, grateful for the genuine warmth behind Salas's words. The bishop was nothing like the scheming villain described in the chronicles. "Your Highness, when did you arrive here, and what duties will you assume going forward?" Salas asked. Shi Feng allowed a small smile. "I will remain by Miss Qian's side from now on." Salas cast a thoughtful glance at Shi Feng and then at Qian Renshui. The bishop's admiration for the young prince climbed to an even higher level. Salas's eyes widened. From what he'd just heard, the bond between Shi Feng and Qian Renshui was far more than mere acquaintanceship. They were almost certainly lovers. If that was true, this holy son really was formidable. He'd arrived in Tiando City and immediately taken Qian Renshui under his protection. Salas knew better than to underestimate him. "Shui Xing has returned to the residence," Shi Feng announced out of the blue. Qian Renshui's delicate features turned serious. "Has the Spirit Hall's champion arrived yet?" Shi Feng nodded. "He's here. He's watching us, but doing so from the shadows."